in detail.
You can put the dates here proleptically.
All right. We begin with Board of Supervisor reports and reports from other government officials. I would note that Mike O'Neill is trapped in Pacifica because of a crash on Highway 1.
Yeah.
So,
So in between here and Pacific.
yes,
Okay.
clearly. All right. So, if we went by age, I think we'd start with Harvey. So the esteemed Harvey Rohrbeck, counselor from Half Moon Bay, do you care to give a government report? Who is echoing?
That's by youngest or oldest.
My speaker's off.
Wait a minute.
Audio is off. Claire, was it you?
Somehow the muting went.
All right. So Dr. Rohrbeck, back to you.
Thanks. The parade, the July 4th parade, was a real success. I've been to a bunch of them, and there were more people there, more enthusiastic, having a good time. The after parties were wonderful. It really was an example of a small town celebrating what deserves to be celebrated. The only substantive update that I have is on the 15th, there's going to be a CERT training for neighborhood leaders who need to learn how to set up neighborhood emergency events and how to use walkie-talkies and how to assess windshield damage. So if you are CERT trained, we need you to register and come to the July 15th training at 8:30 in the morning at Station 40 on Main Street. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody has.
Well, Harvey, I just wanted to mention one other thing. As you know from the emails, I think I copied you on, Matt Chittister is going to provide staff support as we pursue a community fiber network grant. The grant deadline September, and he's also going to give us a letter of endorsement and help us write Supervisor Mueller. Ray has also asked that we get Half Moon Bay involved and do it together. So that's in the works with your city.
Yeah, great. It's been something I've been advocating for a long time. So I really look forward to actually doing something about community broadband.
I don't see any hands raised with questions for Harvey.
He's done.
I believe Harvey is now done. And then we have Mike O'Neill, our esteemed liaison. Where are you, Mike? I know you're there.
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you?
We can.
Okay. I'm going to have to switch to the Word document and just kind of read this. So I won't be able to see any hands for a minute. All right.
Go ahead.
Sorry about not making there, but it was going to be over 2 hours, they said, to get there. So, all right. So this is kind of a resolution, just so that you know what's going on at the county. On the Board of Supervisors agenda for 7/25, next meeting, July 25th, they will be adopting a resolution authorizing the San Mateo County Parks Department to apply for all permits necessary, including a coastal development permit, to make off-leash dog recreation a permissible use at the Quarry Park.
Mm-hmm.
The special meeting that we talked about last regarding the tenant protection ordinance for July 19th is canceled. The reason is the Board of Supervisors at their study session voted not to bring it back until later this year, early next year. But if you do have any feedback or questions about the tenant protection ordinance, give us a call or feel free to reach out to the other supervisors, not just Ray, just whether you're yes or no on the subject. We are engaging with the San Mateo County Parks Department on the issue of Roundup use, and they'll be coming to the MCC in the near future provide an informational overview and to take questions. We also wanted to let everybody know that we will be hosting a community listening session to gain input on the future of Measure K and how dollars are spent to serve Midcoast needs. We'd like to ask the Midcoast Council's help in spreading the word and getting folks out to participate in it. And that is going to take place Wednesday, August 9th at 5:30 to 7 at Ray Mueller's office in the Coast Side in Princeton, there at the shops, at the harbor shops. We also have a great need for some members to step up and work on the Coast Side Design Review Committee members. And we'd like you to see if you can help promote, recommend residents. I checked the website tonight, and I'm not sure if this is accurate because I think they appointed somebody this last meeting, but there was 9 vacancies there on the Coast Side Design Review Committee. And they are going to be having a meeting in Ray's office on the Coast Side tomorrow regarding Cypress Point, I think it's called, development. And it's going to be the Design Review Committee having that meeting. So we will be having a meeting at our office tomorrow around noon. I will be sending this notes to Scott, and there'll be a couple links there. One to see the openings of all the vacancies on the different county commissions. And the other one is a link to apply for those different commissions and committees. On August 5th, we're having the 19th annual San Mateo County Disaster Preparedness Day. And it's on August 5th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the event center there in San Mateo. And there's free hot dogs, free parking, CPR, first aid classes, and interactive preparedness demonstrations. And you can learn more going to smcdisasterprep.org. For those that are in need of some human service agencies, San Mateo has just joined the JPA. That is a statewide JPA that works in all 58 counties. And I've not seen the system, but apparently it's going to be easier for people to apply. And if, let's say, you apply in San Mateo County, but then you move to Sacramento County, it'll be easier for you to keep your benefits going. And there is a phone number if you have questions, and that is 800-223-8383. And again, this will be sent to Scott after I finish reading it for him to post with the minutes. And last but not least, Anna Eshoo, the local congresswoman for the Midcoast, will be speaking and doing a question and answers on this Saturday, July 15th at 9:30 a.m. at the Sharp Park Restaurant in Pacifica. Everybody's welcome. There's a no-host breakfast available, but that is optional if anybody wants to come to it. So that is my report. And now I can see you if anybody has a question.
Would you send that to me as well, Mike? Because I don't want to wait for the minutes to come out. Some of the stuff you mentioned is important enough that I think I'm going to post it on the MCC website right away.
Okay, no problem. So I'll send it to both Scott and Greg.
Any questions for Mike O'Neill? Claire?
First of all, why not send it to everybody?
Okay, send it to the council.
Yeah.
You send it to the whole 7 members? Sure, no problem.
Yeah, sure.
The meeting on the 9th of August about Measure K, that sounds important. You said you wanted us to publicize it. We'd like to do more than just publicize it. We'd like to be involved in some way. What do you think we should do?
To be honest with you, I did not hear about this until today. So I can't really I don't know who's going to be there, the structure or anything. So I'd like to be able to get back to you. But I mean, what we're hoping is you'll post it on your website. If there's a bulletin board, at the post office or whatever, if we can post it out. I'm sure I will check and see if Ray has a newsletter coming out. I know they've been working on it. If he can post, send a special email to the Midcoast about that. So I just heard about this about 3:00 this afternoon. So I'm sorry, but I don't want to give you wrong information, but I will make sure all of you get the notes I just said.
Well, this helps advance toward the idea of having a budget for the Midcoast and is one of the pending items. So I expect you and I will talk and maybe others before that meeting and see if we can advance the structure. Dan had his hand raised.
Yeah, what was the date for the Anna SU at Sharp Park? What was that date again?
It's this Saturday, 9:30 at Sharp Park Restaurant in Pacifica.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the date for the Measure K?
August 9th.
I'm just going to go
We're
back.
going to get a copy of it. We're all going to get.
I think it's August 9th, but I'll be sending you a copy, Dan.
And last, I received a mailer and the post office box regarding, and of course, heard a little bit about the whole Civic Bell concept, and may hear more tonight. But question to you, Mike, is when there's surveys done, somebody chooses the language of how to ask the question, and with that privilege, there's a possibility of kind of leading to the answer that somebody wants. So my question to
Right,
you
it's
is,
a bias survey,
you
yeah.
know how that's going to be like transparent or fully open, and equitable to the community and the MCC.
I missed the first part. You said you got a postcard from who?
Oh, just a general notice about the Civic Bell.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about that.
Civic Bell isn't a county entity. They're here to talk.
Him, if he knows how it is, it's beyond county. It's overlapping.
It's private.
Pacific Bell, I mean, it was bought out by AT&T or SBC Global or whatever. I'm not familiar with that survey.
All right, well, let's do this. There's a Civic Bell person in the audience. Mike, you're saying you don't know anything about it. Let's hear from the Civic Bell person.
I don't think he understood the question. Does he respond?
Oh, Civic Bell.
Yes.
CIVIC?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Pacific Bell. I'm sorry. That's where I couldn't comprehend what you were talking about. I do know Civic Bell has been having some emails back and forth. I am not aware of anything the county has hired or, what I mean, for a survey or anything like that. I will be happy to follow up and get the status of that and send it to you though, Dan. Okay.
Sounds like if you wait 15 minutes, you'll get your answer. Okay. So there's a lot of hands up, but I'm trying to take them in order. The next was Ann.
So this is not actually a question as much as it is a comment. And that's that I would like to see the Board of Supervisors engage with the MCC. Because they're not. When I actually listened to the tenant protection meeting for the 7 hours that it was on, and one of the things Supervisor Corzo mentioned was a list of people they reached out to come up with the tenant protections. And one of the most important ones is the MCC, that they never reached out to us. And so I would like to just see and have you talk to Supervisor Mueller about including us, particularly when there's legislation that's going to be enacted in the unincorporated areas.
I would comment that Ray reached out to me personally as soon as he was aware this was coming up.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah. But they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. The rest of the supervisors drafting the ordinance did not. Right. I understand.
Supervisor Corzo and Supervisor Slocum were engaging in the study sessions for the last 11 months, I think.
Wow.
Going on, and never once came to us.
Wow.
We had other groups that they went to, but never to us. So that is just my point, that even though this came up Thursday, Supervisor Mueller was only given notice that Thursday, and then the meeting was Monday. So he didn't know, but the other supervisors did not.
Should be questions to Mike.
Well, she's asking that Mike reinforce our involvement in studying ordinances like this that affect our area. So-
Right, and I'm
That's
just
what
saying
you're
that this
asking,
is,
Mike.
yeah, and I'm just saying, this is an elected board by the community to be the voice of the community. Even though we're volunteers, it doesn't mean we're not, and we are an advisory, but we are important to the community enough that they go out to vote. So I just wanted to make sure that, they understand that we should be included in these things. And particularly if you're doing study sessions, why would you not want to study the Midcoast?
Do you?
So
Talk to
that's,
Mike, right?
yeah, so that's,
Okay.
So I think Mike is aware of the concept.
thank
You
you.
know, I understand where you're coming from, Ann, and I appreciate that because we were kind of caught flat-footed when this was just all of a sudden announced. And that's why, remember last meeting, I got a text from Ray saying, could we have a special meeting? That's because he just found out about it, and because of the Brown Act, because if Ray had been informed of this was coming, then that would have been a violation of the Brown Act because a majority of the board would have been aware of it and involved in designing it. But there is no, as far as I know, there is no rule against the other supervisors reaching out to community groups to get input because we wanted to have the special meeting with you guys, but we were also going to have the special meeting with Pescadero Municipal Council down there also. And it was going to be the same night actually because of the urgency and time frame. But now it is posted now it will probably be coming back in the end. But Ray is on vacation for the next week. So I don't really feel comfortable sending an email or letter out to the other supervisors to do that without Ray's, previewing it. But I'll put it on the to-do list for when he comes back from vacation.
Thank you.
But it is a valid point, Ann.
Okay, and next in order was Scott. You had your hand raised.
Okay, so last week you mentioned that there were in the San Mateo County Commission, and there's a committee, and one of them was Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So I tried to look that up. And is that to get into that, do you want to go to the Office of Sustainability? Is that part of the Office of Sustainability?
I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And
When I send you this thing, there's going to be a whole link there to all those committees. So,
okay. All right, thanks.
Back to Claire.
and you can post and feel free to post those, links on the MCC website.
Yeah, I will, Mike.
I just want to put this meeting on Measure K onto my calendar. And that is a night that the MCC has a regularly scheduled meeting. Would you like us to co-sponsor this? Would you like us to cancel our meeting? What would you like us to do? We should probably talk about it offline.
I didn't even check the date to see if there was a conflict. It's the same night as your meeting.
Yes.
Maybe I'm just talking because like I said, I just heard about this like at 3:00 this afternoon. Maybe we should think about having your meeting started. I'm just throwing this out for discussion. Meeting start at 5:30 and then people, no, okay. Let me get back to you as to the structure of that, okay?
Yeah, let's have more
understand.
discussions because there are also business commitments and some of the people here have jobs and can't necessarily get here as early. So let's have repeating a series of discussions and decide what we're going to do and announce it on July 26th at our next meeting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Claire, but I just found out about it about 3:00. So I'm kind of in the dark also. So
It's probably just another example of where people should think about the MCC when they schedule things and plan things.
All right.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands in the audience for Mike. So I thank Mike for his time. I note that there appeared to be somebody here from GCSD and there was a planning commissioner here, but I don't see any hands raised to speak. All right. So I hear no further comments from government officials.
Oh, Greg, sorry, it's
Oh.
Hannah.
There you are.
Wanted me to give a couple updates quickly.
Yeah, right. Go for it, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to use this time to give two brief updates about some ongoing concerns or questions for the Parks Department. So the first being, regarding dogs in some of the meadow areas at Quarry Park as part of the dog recreation going on at Quarry Park. We've heard from a select few neighbors about the concern that in particular the meadow area above the playground is an area where dogs will often be observed, and that there's a conflict with the park use by children or by families in that area. From the Parks Department, monitoring and the work that or the observations that our rangers are making while out there, we've never heard or seen any complaints or issues or conflicts that have arisen from dogs using that meadow area. We have actually heard positive comments from the public that oftentimes it's parents who are watching their family in the playground who are in that area with their dog, and so that is a reason why we have not enforced or consider that something that we need to strictly enforce. It's certainly something we would continue to monitor and see if there are ever any issues or conflicts that would arise from dogs being in the meadow areas. But from our position, it's not a conflict that we're observing or getting complaints about, and aren't planning to strictly enforce. In terms of monitoring that we did for dogs off trail, we were specifically looking at dogs traveling off trail into vegetated areas like shrubs or potential wildlife habitat areas, because we wanted to avoid disturbance to wildlife or like nesting birds or other animals that might be just off trail. And that was part of our CEQA review. And so that was in particular what we were reporting out on while we were monitoring specifically for dogs traveling off trail. And so I did just want to be able to provide that update and that clarification, since we have had some questions about that. And then I just wanted to briefly update that regarding the drainage concerns for Quarry Park. Parks is definitely still involved in continuing that, seeing if there's a resolution or a solution to that. It is something that we do need to continue to coordinate with DPW on, because any other solutions like that may involve diverting water into a different drainage or into a different direction. We want to make sure we're not inadvertently causing any other issues downstream or further down the road. So it's definitely something we still need to be working with DPW on and are continuing those conversations. So I did just want to provide an update that this is still something that we're working on, and it is a coordinated effort.
So who at DPW is working with you on that?
It's the roads department.
Qua?
Yeah. And Ryan is the coast side sort of road supervisor.
Okay, I would just comment that I've been in that neighborhood while the stuff was happening, and it's clear we have a solution. It's just that the temporary barrier, which successfully diverted the water, also blocked access to the park. And I think if we had the culvert run under the road, we could still allow the park to be used, safety permitting, while diverting the road. So, I mean, I think we already have the solution.
Yeah, I think, we just want, we would have to go through a coastal development permit process to put in a new culvert like that. There's some things that we need to further analyze in terms of the potential risk of diverting runoff or diverting flow of water in that direction. I know we observed it this winter, and it seemed to be, not causing any flooding or any, major concerns down the road. But we just want to make sure before we, commit to that, essentially, that we're not inadvertently causing any other issues. So that's just something that we continue to need to work on, essentially.
Yeah, that's all reasonable, Hannah. Did we have any comments questions from the audience? Okay, Kimberly.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate the update. I have one question or point of confusion and concern regarding dogs in the playground area. A couple times you said, well, you haven't received any complaints, but the complaints you have received came to the MCC. So are you just discounting that those are formal complaints? And then the question I have is, you seem to say that these things aren't strictly enforced. And is there a rule, or was the playground set aside just, to exclude dogs? And if that's the case, why are you not enforcing it?
So the playground, the fenced playground, is an area where dogs are prohibited, and that is signed accordingly. And that and the point of discussion is regarding the meadow area above that, like this beside that, where it's outside of the black fenced playground. And so we would certainly be enforcing the rule that dogs are not allowed in the fenced playground area. But the other point of, saying that if dogs are using this meadow, or dogs are present in this meadow, that they're also, effectively in the playground area, that's not an area we consider specifically the playground. And so there's, point of sort of differing opinion on that. And so from our position, we're just saying that we don't consider that part of the formal playground. What is the black fenced area is certainly where we would be enforcing the prohibited access for dogs. But what we've heard as a concern is that dogs being present in the meadow area is making that area less accessible for families or for children to use the meadow. But what I'm saying is that's not something that we've observed.
So I just want to push on that a little, because a couple of times now we've heard residents complain about this issue. And so I wonder if, there's a point of clarity that you need to put up signage and clearly inform the community what area is considered the playground, and that it's off limits to dogs, because this seems to be continuing. I've heard other community members complain about it, and it sounds to me like because you're not seeing it at the times that you're there, that you're just not dedicated to addressing it. And
we do have signage, on the playground where we have dogs prohibited. So that is clearly signed that dogs are not allowed in the playground. We don't have signs, indicating no dogs in the meadow, because again, that's not an area we consider the playground where dogs are prohibited.
Especially when attending high-profile events.
okay.
Len, you have your hand up, and then Burnett here is in person. Len, did you want to ask Hannah a question?
Yes, I did. With regard to what you were just discussing, I thought the concern on the upper, more open area is whether the dogs are off leash, not whether the dogs are present.
I've heard both. I think I would just consider it dogs in general.
It's a big difference. I mean, if the dogs are in that running around off leash, that's different than them being in that area on a leash. And I think that's where the concern is.
Okay.
Burnett,
Sorry, Greg.
Burnett's here. He's written you along with Fran Pollard, so he can express his concerns.
Right. First of all, I understood it was supposed to be off-leash dogs on the trails, not off-leash dogs throughout the park. So it's one thing that's a little confusing. the comments, but yes, we have heard and provided some pictures showing the off-leash dogs running in that area above the top lot. It seems to be more above the top lot than in the top lot. I wish Fran was here because she's right on the corner. She sees it every day. She's had repeated complaints about it, so have I. People have talked to me about it. I don't know if it's this, I don't know why you're not observing it when we can take pictures of it. It might be a timing issue. I don't know, but there is proof that it is happening. It is a concern. Some people don't like to go up there when the dogs are running around because of that particular aspect. As far as the runoff and the diversion, to skip over to that, because that's one thing that Kim did bring up something about the runoff, but I didn't get to that in your answer. But Greg was talking about diverting. Diverting isn't going to solve the problem down Santa Maria. It helps. Believe me, it helps. But take a look at some of the provisions that are provided, both to the county and as well as to the MCC. Even with the diversion, there were sandbags like 3 feet high at some of the corners to block that water from going down the sidewalks and stuff and into people's front yards. And that's with the diversion. So the diversion helped. Don't believe me, and we're appreciative of the diversion, those of us that live on Santa Maria. But that's not the solution. And if you go down and see where that water was diverted, when they got down to San Diego, it pulled right at that quote drain, which is a pseudo drain because it goes into the drain under the highway, then out into the meadow. It is really not like a storm drain that you would normally think dumps and it goes under water and is disposed of. It goes under the highway and dump it. And there's pictures of that as well. Big pools of the water at that corner when it finally got that diverted water got down through Columbus down to San Diego. It was basically you had to drive through a puddle of water to go down San Diego past that thing. So I don't think that that is the ultimate solution. It helped. It basically helped when we did, but there was still a lot of water going down Santa Maria that had to be sandbagged to protect it from going into people's front yards and into people's garages and so on. So
Thank you for that clarification. And I'm confident you will find this written in our MCC stormwater report coming out, I hope shortly. This will be documented. Right. No, this goes beyond Hannah's specific charter. There is no stormwater master plan for the county. There is no stormwater master plan for the Midcoast. And the position in DPW that is in charge of stormwater, Mike O'Neill confirmed to me today, is still not filled since at least December 6th last year. So there's a need for effort on this, and it goes beyond what Hannah can contribute. But I thank her for her comments, and we will be seeing her later on the agenda.
I'm not dumping this on you, Hannah. I'm just clarifying from what I'm seeing and what I'm enduring from this runoff.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. Any other government official reports? Seeing no hands, I will now open it for public comment, and I'll begin with the person from Civic Bell who is here in the audience.
I am on.
Hi, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Here on behalf of Civic Bell, a locally owned verified social media platform, strengthening the bond between communities and their local governments. So we've identified that the coast side is a regional hotspot of community engagement, and especially with the local government as it connects to the people, right? So this is a place facing a unique range of dynamic issues as well, as we've already seen so far. Some important topics recently I've heard the council discuss is affordable housing, climate resiliency, sewer water infrastructure, and the council has demonstrated that these are best managed when engaging with the local communities that do face these issues, like we've seen in the audience today. So now that Civic Bell is growing, we have an established presence in the coast side. We have some notable figures like Councilmember Gus present today, Assemblymember Mark Berman, Sophia Lane of the Korea Unified School District, Sid of the Montero Water and Sanitary District, and more. And we have thousands of users who are now visiting just out of our pilot regions in District 5 of Santa Clara and the coast side alone. So in turn, we'd like to invite officially all members of the council and of the community and other local government officials of the coast side to join Civic Bell and to help enforce reinforce the strength of local community engagement with the local government to be able to voice community issues from the ground up, and as a group of local officials, better understand the needs of your constituencies directly through a vetted, verified, no bots, no people from outside of your constituency, social media like platform, really renovating what it means to be exactly that. So if anyone has any specific questions about what we do, for me, or as we were talking earlier with Mr. O'Neill, I'm happy to answer those now. Otherwise, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and I'll be here after the meeting if anyone wants to further discuss. I yield my time.
This is public comment.
This is a public comment, and we're not allowed to question public comment, is my understanding.
Yes.
Okay, but certainly we've been engaged with Civic Bell, and we can follow up.
Sure.
But so that's an invitation to the council to join, and we can discuss that later. Next public comment, I see Jane Praysilver is here with her hand up.
Oh, hi. Last time, at the last meeting, there was some discussion that the tenants' rights would be discussed, and I understand that's been tabled. I scrambled to do some research. I'll start with my ask is that when that does finally come up, I'd really hope that the community would have enough time to get informed about what was being proposed, explore different options. When I read an article from San Mateo Daily Journal, there was talk about you couldn't rent for less than a year. There would be arbitration and an overseeing by the county of your property rental, and that concerned San Mateo County. There was what was called a benefit, which would be that seniors could stay in their home longer. I thought, oh, wow, that sounds great. And then I thought a little bit about what it meant when my mom passed away at home. It's a lot of care, a lot of hospice in and out. And I began to ask myself, if we have untrained people that are agreeing to take care of elderly people, will that elderly person really get the care that they want, or will their family not be allowed to move in to take care of them? So that's another complex issue that I think is worth discussing. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that the United States has lost about 11% of its middle class. And if the state of California is interested, they have said, I can't give you the exact quote, but they think that because buildings are so expensive, the only really way to help with housing would be to increase density. And I know the town of Huntington Beach is very upset about that. But I am concerned about some of our seniors having to shoulder more bond issues to rebuild infrastructure if we increase density quite a bit. But I'm all for increasing the housing as far as the farm workers and such. And I just think that the community should have adequate time to discuss the pros and cons and really give a chance. And I love Ann's ideas that if we can have more input to the county through the MCC, that would be fantastic. So thank you.
Jane, I'm going to bring this up under council member activity later, but I expect to form a work group so that we can start studying this issue now. And while it may not come up until December, we should at least be taking your feedback. If you could send your comments, those written comments to me, I'd like to include them in a portfolio of materials we'll look at.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Next, we have Steve Terry.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me okay? I have trouble with my audio. I think I need to reboot my machine.
We hear you.
Okay. Thank you. My comment is, I know you cannot comment on my comment. This is public comment, but I just listened to the comment about Civic Bell, and I don't have a position either way, pro or con, but I just wanted to sort of point out to the board, to the council, that as far as I can tell, Civic Bell is a merchandising concern. And so they're in it to make money. And it looks like their revenue model is that you pay, if you want to post surveys, if you want to make surveys, you need a premium account, and then you'll be able to sort of launch surveys. And that concerns me a little bit, because that could be used in a bad way. I'm not saying it will be. I'm just saying it has a potential of being used in a bad way to launch like push polls or something like that. And in the end, it allows like moneyed interests to put out surveys to sort of sway public opinion on certain things. So I'm just a little bit wary, a little bit wary about how this might be used. Just something to keep in mind. That's my only comment. Thanks a lot.
Council received letters from folks about Cypress Point, or is that, does that need to be read in public comment or?
My understanding right now is it does not. There is, however, a letter which does get read during this meeting about the dark skies. Okay. Claire.
My understanding is that if they requested to have it read, it should be read.
Right. And I did not see that. But I will say this, I'm building a portfolio of all those emails as part of our work group studying the impact of the Cypress Point development. So I've retained links and those materials will be available to us as we consider what we're going to say. All right, Burnett.
I move that we approve the consent.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that answers second on the consent agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Vote on that?
Yeah,
So Gus,
Yeah.
Claire,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Greg,
yes.
me, I'm a yes, Ann,
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. You're out of order, Burnett, but you wanted to say something.
Okay, just was reading what you said here and you can provide written comment to the board. It says the council members will accept short email comments to your email address to be read or summarized at the meeting up to 1 hour prior to the start of the meeting. I would just suggest if you want to have somebody request that you put it in your instructions for people that they request to have it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an important change. Okay. With that, I think we're ready to move to the major item on the agenda. I'll turn it over to Dan Haggerty, who is sponsoring this discussion on ecological light pollution.
Okay, thank you. Yes, see, Dr. Longcore is right there. Let's see, introduce, so just want to let everybody know, Dr. Longcore has been studying artificial night lighting effects on ecology for 25 years. Is adjunct professor and co-chair of the Environmental Science and Engineering program at the UCLA Institute of Environment and Sustainability. He's science director of Urban Wildlands Group, a Los Angeles-based conservation nonprofit, and an independent ecological design and environmental policy consultant. So I just want to say we're all extremely fortunate tonight to have Dr. Longcore's time to help us better understand this important topic. And so without further ado, Dr. Longcore.
Great. Well, thanks, Dan, for the introduction. Hello to everybody from Los Angeles up to you. So what I had planned, and I'm open to amendments as it goes along, is a presentation to introduce some of the issues around the ecological consequences of light at night, and followed by some question and answer. I myself chair a community council type organization that represents about 26,000 people, and I'm familiar with the need to move things along and get to the questions in the event that people are ready for that. And so I would encourage someone to go ahead and interrupt. I won't take it badly if you want to at some point switch to questions and have had enough of going back to school on this topic. So I appreciate if you do that and welcome the flexibility as needed. So hopefully I'll be able to share my screen. Indeed, we can. And we'll talk a bit here.
We see your slides.
Perfect. There we go. About the ecological effects of light pollution. And as Dan mentioned, I got started on this bunch of years ago. We published our first work on it. We did a conference actually in 2002 that got a little bit of coverage around the same time as the National Park Service was getting started with its night skies work, and published a few things. This article that we did in 2004 kind of established this as a field that deserved a bit more scientific attention, and we edited a book in 2006 that holds up pretty well to this day as hitting the basics of the impacts of artificial light at night. And so that's just by way of maybe qualification and background and some things that you can look up in case you're interested. And what we're really talking about is something that generally has a pretty intuitive sense to people, that it's a special thing to be able to see a clear night sky with your ability to view the Milky Way with the naked eye, that it stands to reason then that most of life on the planet was evolved in conditions that had this during the new moon and then a little bit brighter during the full moon, and that we are losing views like the one that is in this photograph, which is from the north rim of the Grand Canyon. It's a hemispherical photograph, so the horizon is all around the edges, a little bit of light pollution on the horizon here, a campfire. But you compare to that if you get into the outskirts of Los Angeles in our national recreation area, and it's pretty bright already. You can't see that Milky Way here very well with the naked eye. This is an extended exposure using a special camera that we have. And if you get close to and into downtown Los Angeles and a little bit of, cloud cover, it looks like this. And so there are places here close to LA that are natural lands that actually never experience a condition that's any dimmer than probably 2 times the brightness of the full moon, which from a natural communities and natural resources perspective is really quite frightening. And it's also disrupting to people and their enjoyment of the environment. So that's just sort of a quick illustration of what it is we're talking about viscerally when you go out and experience different places with different levels of, we'll call it stray light, light pollution, wasted light that gets up into the atmosphere. And when we start to talk about ecology, we've got about 4 different areas that I like to categorize them into, in part because I could think up icons that went with each of them and illustrate it with my rudimentary skills. The first is attraction and disorientation, so things that are attracted or repulsed by lights. The second goes along with that, which is the loss of connectivity of landscapes that you have if you're not thinking about the nighttime and the behavior of animals relative to lights. The third are all of the interactions between species like pollination, like predator and prey, and interruption of those ecological interactions based on the levels of light, because there's a lot of these relationships that are governed by the light environment, and about half of all species across all groups are active at night. Some much higher, amphibians, like 90% of amphibians are nocturnal, over half of insects. And so there's a lot of these interactions that are governed by the nighttime natural light environment. And finally, the sort of disruption of daily rhythms that we call circadian rhythms that are tied to light levels, but also monthly rhythms, things that are tied to light levels associated with the light of the moon, and seasonal rhythms, behaviors, physiology, breeding behavior, migration, all of which can be tied to the detection of how long the day is. And so I want to give you some examples of all 4 of these for your background and interest. And I'm sure you, as do we in our community council, deal with a lot of review of developments and a lot of questions about the impacts those developments have, and wanting to connect up the best science with things that people are proposing to protect the environment and the resources of our community. So when we talk about orientation and disorientation, one of the best known things is just attraction to lights. And we've known this literally forever as humans, that insects are attracted to lights. It's in the Bhagavad Gita, it's in Shakespeare, it's pretty much everywhere. This is actually a painting of the Eddystone light in 1912, if I remember right, showing just this massive attraction of songbirds that come to the lighthouses during migration. And I always, so that may seem far away, but I wanted to draw our attention to this paper from the American literature from 1916 about the destruction of birds at lighthouses on the coast of California, where they sent out a survey to all the lighthouse keepers. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Pigeon Point, Point Montara get somewhere pretty close to your neighborhood. And those lighthouse keepers were interviewed, Anna Nueva Island as well. And they were finding migratory birds that were attracted to and colliding with and at cases at those lighthouses. So it isn't something that's far away and over the hill. It's something that it was happening then, and in fact still happens to this day. Just to give you a sense of how this works, birds are attracted to the lights, and they end up sort of swirling around them. This is almost 25 years old now, but this is out of Chicago, and it's a lighted building, and you can see all those little light flecks, I hope, are coming through. Every one of those is a bird, and they tend to be birds that are going from wintering grounds in Central and South America up to breeding grounds, maybe north of you or north of us in LA. And they're songbirds. They migrate at night because it's cooler and they have to eat during the day. And they get just disoriented and attracted to the lights. And then they end up in places that are dangerous for them during the day. So all of these birds here were actually collected at buildings after during a migratory periods. This happens to be from New York, but we do have examples from San Francisco, from the West, up in Vancouver, et cetera, that show these rather magnificent small songbirds attracted out of their normal routes and encountering environments that they shouldn't encounter. The glass then is the thing that kills them during the day. And they also basically should be going to places that are natural areas and not urban areas, but the lights literally draw them away from where they should be. I want to bring this to San Mateo County. There's a tool you can go and look at called Birdcast, where they use weather radar to calculate every night during migration the number of birds that are headed over the county. And I just randomly picked April 15th of this year. Happened to be a pretty high night. There were 551,400, give or take a few, birds migrating over San Mateo County the night of April 15th. Basically, any particular time at night, there were 73,000 birds in flight over your county at that point. And if you go down, this website's pretty incredible. By extracting all these data, can show you the altitude of the birds, when they were coming, what happens through the whole season, how many cumulatively crossed over during the course of migration. And so these data are processed and are shared out during spring and fall migration by some of my colleagues at Colorado State and Cornell, and just provides a tool so that people understand what's going on over us at night. And this happens in LA too. And I use these tools to try to explain to people that even though you might not be seeing these every day in your yard, we along the Pacific coast do have enormous numbers of birds migrating over us that lights are going to attract and put them in places where they're going to be at risk. So just to illustrate how this works, the attraction bit, these are some animations from some fledgling seabirds that were coming off a nesting site. This is by a Spanish colleague of mine. And the red paths show you what happens. The left side is the lights from a satellite, and the right side is the map. And you see the lights along the coast there. These seabirds, as they try to get out to the ocean, they just can't grapple with the idea of light that's supposed to be food if you're a seabird, because there's bioluminescent algae organisms in the ocean that they would cue into to forage, and so light to them means a different thing than what it really is in terms of urbanization. So out of, I think, 9 birds that they radio tracked here, 2 of them only made it out to the ocean. So it really does show you that things are getting drawn off, of course, by these lights, and the more we can minimize that light going up, which of course we don't need for our human purposes anyway, the more we can reduce those kinds of impacts. Okay. The other example of attraction that you might be very familiar with are sea turtles. You don't have them nesting that far north. Maybe as climate changes, we might get a few here in Los Angeles, but it's a pretty well-known example where the hatchlings are attracted to lights and don't make it to the ocean. And it's pretty tragic, but completely preventable. Insect attraction is another one. This is just from a study that we did down in the Peruvian Amazon to show you the numbers of insects that can be attracted in a place that has no light, no artificial light before. This is actually a site that's going to be an oil or a gas pipeline, and that's the amount of insects you get attracted when you put a light into an undisturbed natural environment during a peak season. And there's some of our colleagues that worked on this insect attraction study, but it can be much more mundane than that. These is just some illustration from a colleague of mine in Germany, showing, if I can speed this up a little bit, go ahead and load. There we go. Just an uplight there with a light, and those insects get attracted to it and then are going to die on that lamp. Hundreds of them at a single light. This then interrupts ecological interactions, which is this next big category of things. So pollination, and to remember that a lot of pollination goes on at night, including of our crops and including things other than honeybees. Our native moths are great pollinators. And so light, as has been shown now in studies around the world, interrupts pollination and can decrease seed set and affect the reproduction of our plants, both crops and native plants. Other interactions, I'll give you another California coastal example here from our work in Southern California. That's a western snowy plover, which is a threatened shorebird that lives all along the coast, including along on your sandy beaches as well. And we looked at western snowy plover and California grunion, which is this interesting fish that you probably all are familiar with, that will come up onto the beach to spawn. And we had a bunch of data from community scientists who have tracked the plovers and tracked the grunion, and we know where all the grunion and plover sites are, and those are the blue and yellow dots along the coastline. And we took and measured the light pollution on the beach. In this whole distance here, we took 500 different measurements using a special camera that's sensitive to low light to figure out the total amount of illumination all along there. And then we're able to extrapolate out and create a model to describe the light, the brightest areas. And that light is actually this line here, which is just the coastline extended, is right here. That's the Port of Los Angeles, super bright. It gets darker out here in Malibu, and then out here in Ventura County, a little bit more brighter down here on the Oxnard Plain, brighter along Santa Monica. And when we built some models to describe how these two species were using the beach and accounting for their other preferences, like how wide is the beach and how close is water, fresh water and things like that. It turns out for both of these species, the amount of light pollution on the beach was either the first or second most important thing defining where they were either roosting in the case of the plovers or coming on the beach to spawn in the case of the grunion. And both of them had very specific preferences. The plovers liked it darker, and you found a decrease in their prevalence over, that's about half the brightness of a full moon. So if you had light pollution that's over half the brightness of the full moon, you had a radically decreased probability of finding snowy plovers. The grunion actually were found a little bit up to the amount of light of a full moon, but decreased after that. And that didn't surprise us a whole lot because grunion will spawn during the full moon and the new moon, but the full moon as well. So the full moon was completely cool for them, but you start going over that in light pollution and you decrease your prevalence. Give you another example here. This is our famous P22 mountain lion from Griffith Park. And gives us an example of thinking about how light can serve as a barrier. The route that P22 got to Griffith Park in the middle of Los Angeles was probably along the darkest path. Because mountain lions will avoid going in areas that are particularly bright. And the only reason this mountain lion did is he had to escape his father, basically. As a juvenile, he could stick around, but once he got to be mature, if he tried to stay, his father would have killed him. And so he sought out a path and found his way to Griffith Park and had to deal with things like barriers like this, roadways that are lit up. And we have evidence from the GPS collars on mountain lions. I'm on a study that's going to come out soon, where we had 103 mountain lions in Southern California, the amount of light is, again, incredibly important in determining where those mountain lions will be active. And so when you light up the landscape, here it's the light and the cars and trucks. I won't argue there, but they will actually avoid the light itself as a signal of where the people are. So it becomes a barrier on a landscape. And there's other studies that is similar to this where bats, which of course are very useful organisms to keep our insect populations in control, some species will actually avoid lights, and lights become a barrier to them across the landscape. So there's a lot to think about here. Our fish, this is the Sundial Bridge in Reading, which was lighted this way in what I can only refer to as vanity lighting by the architect, like, look at my bridge. But that's really bad for our salmon that are trying to migrate in and out of that river, because it will harm the migration of the out migrating spelt, who are attracted to those lights and won't go beyond it. So it becomes a barrier in the river to the fish below it, a barrier created by light. And this was a big enough deal that California Department of Fish and Wildlife had to go out and do some studies and work on how they could mitigate this after the fact, to get the light out of the river where it didn't need to be and onto the bed of the roadway, where is the important place for it to be for human use and safety. And we can also think a bit about the nighttime in urban areas as being a refuge for species that could otherwise be active during the day. These are just some camera trap data from around the little LA area. And you see these deer and bobcat and coyotes. There's probably a badger in there too. Most of that is either at night or in the dawn and dusk period. A lot of species that would otherwise might be active during the day, like coyotes, or deer will do this as well, move their activity to the nighttime to avoid humans. And so lights become sort of even more important in urban areas if we're going to coexist with other species, to give them those areas as a dark refuge during the nighttime, away from people and away from the lights. That animation didn't work. Hold on just a second. Let me just delete that. Okay, so that you can see that. This is giving us an example of how light affects the internal rhythms of organisms. In this instance, it's a seasonal pattern. This is a field of soybeans. And what you're seeing in most of the field here that's a little brown is those soybeans have set seed because they're winter soybeans, and they've detected that the days are getting shorter, and so they set seed. It's like they're using the light as a signal on what to do during the year. And then you have this street light up here, and you can see that there's a couple of areas surrounded that are just green and then a little less green. And then you can actually see the shadow of the street light in the soybeans. And that's because the soybeans that are closest to the light have not detected that the days are getting shorter. They still think it's, summer's going to go on forever and they don't have to set seed. Everything's great because they've been robbed of the seasonal signal by the streetlight. This is actually a big enough deal that there was a rather large study funded by the Iowa Department of Transportation looking at this, and soybean farmers can lose up to 30% of their crop this way if they're next to lights. Now, I just give this as an example of a very sort of stark illustration, but there are plenty of other things that are associated with detecting the day length. The migratory period of birds, when birds will lay their eggs, the seasonal adaptation of species, it comes up this way. And I'll give you another example. It's very far afield, but I love it too much to not share it with you, is reindeer. Reindeer, if you didn't know, actually have two different colored eyeballs, one color for the wintertime and one color for the summertime. In the wintertime, their eyes are blue. And in the summertime, their eyes are yellow. And they do that to filter out the light during the summertime. And the blue, they're actually absorbing as much light as they possibly can during the winter. So their eyes basically convert into sunglasses in the summer as opposed to the winter. And the folks who researched this, they discovered a set of reindeer that had green eyeballs. And they're like, well, what's up with that? It turns out that they were captive and in a pen that was held just over the hill from street lighting. And so the street lights kept the light up at a high enough level that the reindeer's eyeballs didn't adapt. And we could go for an hour about how human physiology is affected, but suffice to say, your daily rhythms are affected by the light you expose yourself to. The primary amount that it is stuff that you do yourself, the lights that you have in your home, your screens, et cetera. But also there's a high statistical correlation between the light outdoors and things like sleep disruption. We've done that for California teachers. I was part of a study of looking at teachers in California that showed just sleep disruption based on light outdoors, as well as this has been shown nationally for breast cancer, for prostate cancer, and for a number of other disruptions of our daily rhythms. And I can, later in questions, I can get into how the cancer part works if you're interested in that. So then we get to the question of, well, what do you do about it? And one thing is that the light perceiving systems in other species are not the same as humans. Humans, we see across blue and green and yellow and orange and red. And other species don't see all of that, or they have different levels of sensitivity. So a deer, for example, doesn't see the orange and the red. This goes the same thing for horses. And I know this because I got a call once from some folks who wanted to build a hospital for very expensive racehorses, and they wanted to know how they should do the lighting to minimize the impact on the horses, but let people see. And so I did some quick research and recommended that they actually light with red light, because people will be able to see, get around, do what they need to do, but the horses are almost completely unable to see red light. And same thing goes to deer. And if we look across all species, and that's a couple of years worth of research there on a slide, but these are all different curves of the sensitivity of different species to different wavelengths of light. So just to explain, the things I have in purple and black over on the left, that's ultraviolet light that we as humans don't actually see. As we get past up about 450, 400, we get into actual purples and blues that humans see. Human vision maximizes its efficiency during the day at 550 up here. And then we see way over here into the longer wavelengths like reds off above 600 nanometers. But this is all these different species, 175 different species. I was able to track down this sensitivity curves and to see that other species on average do see quite a bit in the blue and the ultraviolet and shorter wavelengths. And so if we want things that humans can see, but that other species can't, so it's for us to avoid impacting other things, we probably want to be using our longer wavelengths, our yellows, our ambers, our reds. And this just sort of illustrates that by different group of organism. Insects see a lot in the ultraviolet, a lot into the blue. So very blue lights, ultraviolet lights are going to attract a lot of insects. And that's why if you go to the store today and you look for a bug light's going to be yellow. And that's because as you get into the yellow, you're going to hit that sweet spot where humans can see the light, but it's less, insects are less sensitive to it. And this holds true pretty much across the board, but to differing degrees in different groups. Sorry to go super nerdy on you here, but I figured you might want to know the rationale behind some of the recommendations that I'm going to get to here in just a second. So imagining that you care about these things and you want to protect the nighttime environment because you care about the sky and seeing the stars, and that's a perfectly good reason, or you care about it for human health reasons or for cultural reasons having to do with connection to place and the universe, or you care about it from a wildlife perspective, the advice is all pretty much the same. From the work that I've done on wildlife to the work of what's most impactful for seeing the night sky from a human perspective, you get to these same 5 bits of advice. First, lighting only where you need to, turning lights off when they're not in use. And that's something I shouldn't think we should need to say because it's wasteful. And I don't know, I grew up, shutting off the lights in my room when I left the room, but, light has gotten very cheap because we use LEDs and they're very energy efficient. And so when things get cheap, people tend to overuse them. So reminding ourselves that we shouldn't be using light, especially outdoor light, when we don't need it, both because it can do damage to the environment, but also because we're basically wasting energy. So things like motion detectors or timers to turn lights off when they're not needed. Only making it as bright as you need it for the task. And many things today are overlit because people aren't educated on the way the human eye works. Making something brighter, especially outdoor light that you're going to have at night, doesn't necessarily make everything more visible to your eye because your eye is going to adapt to the brightest thing in your field of view. And so if you have your lights super bright, the shadows get darker and you cannot see as well. It is not as safe to have things that have a very, very high contrast with the surrounding. So choosing lower lighting levels and then directing that light where you need it, not where it doesn't need to go. So we have shields. You can get shielded fixtures. You can get aftermarket shields. You can fashion your own shields if you need to, but getting that light to go on the surfaces that you want to illuminate as opposed to going upward, almost never needed, or another example, or downward into a wetland or some sensitive habitat. So, or out into the beach, for the example of our plovers. So getting that light where it's needed and then using what's called the lowest possible correlated color temperature. It's called a CCT. And that is an expression of the spectral composition, the wavelengths, the colors of light that you have. And a lower color temperature means it's more yellow or red. And a high color temperature means it's more blue. And the way you find this out, if you go to a store, pick up a light lamp, it's going to say on it something like daylight. That's probably a higher color temperature. If it says warm white, that's maybe somewhere in the middle or lower. And then a bug light would be even lower than that. Every one that you pick up, you're probably going to be able to look on the back and it will give you a number. It will say something like 3000 K for the color. K stands for Kelvin. That's a color temperature. Or it might say 2700 K, or it might say 6000 K. I would encourage everybody and everybody you work with to recommend never going over 3000 K unless you've got a really super great reason that you can rationalize, and to push for lower and lower color temperatures that are more like some of the older lighting systems we had, like the high pressure sodium, the sort of orange lights that we had for 70 years that have now been replaced by the LEDs. So pushing for those low color temperatures. So just to put this for the visual learners, part night lighting, that's turning the lights off when you don't need them. Shielding, that's getting the light down where it needs to be. And here we're also illustrating another principle with walkway lighting, is getting the lights lower. That also means you might have to have more. So there's trade-offs, and you can work with lighting engineers and designers to figure out this. But the more you can get the light exactly where you need it and not elsewhere, the better. Spectra control, going with yellower lights versus whiter or bluer lights. Overall dimming or overall intensity reductions, and then dimming is another thing that we can do with LEDs, where, especially if we're talking about like a street light system, with LEDs, we have the ability to install them with controls that let you reduce the intensity of the light without really any energy penalty. The old lights you couldn't do this with, but now you can hook up a street light system with controls and dim them to half brightness or quarter brightness or something after peak hours of need. And we just recommended this, and we think they're going to run with it for the new street light master plan for Salt Lake City. They brought in a team that I was on to give them a plan that did exactly the things that I'm talking to you about tonight, which is to minimize the effects of the night sky, because the importance of that to tourism and to their cultural, sort of stargazing culture in the Great Basin area, to make it safe for people and to reduce the impacts on wildlife. And we did this in such a way and created a set of rules that they have adopted that involve things like dimming, and being able to control those lights when they're not needed, turning things off in parking lots when they're not needed, or putting them on motion detectors or heat detectors so that you get that light when you need it and not when you don't. All in the interest of an environment that's going to be better for wildlife. It's going to be better for being able to sort of see and appreciate our place in the universe. And it is also going to be better for our biological health as human beings, as long as we individually take care to control our own light exposure late at night, if that's something that you care about, because you can do a whole lot of damage with your iPod or your iPad late at night before you go to bed. So with that, I'll leave you with what you probably don't want to look like in your environment, but is what we do look like down here in Los Angeles during a major national holiday, and encourage any questions that you might have, or copy down my email and feel free to drop me a line and we can continue the conversation.
Dan, are you going to lead the questions, or you want me to?
Why don't you go ahead?
All right. I see Ed Lorenas has his hand up, so I'll start with the community first and then come to the council. Ed, go ahead. Ed's muted.
Ed, you're muted.
I asked him to unmute.
I want you to skip.
All right, we'll go to Steve Terry. Steve, can you unmute?
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank
All
you.
right, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks for that presentation, Travis. That was really, really good. I appreciated it. One comment I have is that we had a project done here recently in the last couple of years where, on your 5 bullet points for minimizing adverse effects of light, that project didn't hit any one of them, even though, like, in the plant paper design, they were supposed to hit all of them, and so that was really kind of discouraging.
Yeah.
And but the other point I want to make, and it kind of relates to that project too, is that I don't think the county, which is our planning and development, planning and building department, understands the difference between luminance and illuminance. So luminance, which is how much a light is putting out, how much brightness a light is putting out, versus illuminance, which is how much a particular piece of surface gets light from any source, who knows what. And so even though, like, the paper design said no limit luminance to this place here, they had no concept of that, no comprehension of that, but and then did an analysis regarding illuminance. It's only illuminating this area by this much, that much, according to some CAD designs, and so we think we're fine. And so they don't have the capacity to even control this. And my question is, I wonder if you ever work with governments, planning and building governments, and on this issue, and have you encountered problems, and how do you go about sort of informing them and bringing them up to speed?
Yeah. So first of all, yes to everything that you said. This is exactly one of the challenges that we encounter. I came to this meeting tonight from another hearing in Los Angeles about basically a digital sign network, allegedly for communication about traffic, but really is digital billboards. And the problem that you described was exactly the problem that I had there. And the way I dealt with it was I contacted behind the scenes and actually made an appointment and talked to the planning staff, because they had written some things in the code, the proposed code, that they thought were going to control the light from these things. And I said, you need to understand that this isn't going to achieve what you want to achieve. First of all, what you've written doesn't make sense from a physics standpoint, and it's completely unenforceable because it's unmeasurable. They literally didn't understand the things that they were writing in terms of the measurement, because planners end up having to be instant experts on everything. And this is a very, very hard topic to be an expert on. And I won't even I'll admit, I meet with my physicist friends and I'll say something, they're like, no, technically that's wrong. And this is after doing this for years and years and years and years and years. So what do I do in terms of this? reaching out individual to people who are interested, working with people through local advocacy groups, or if I'm lucky, the Salt Lake City was a great example where they actually went out looking for a team that had expertise, and somebody put together a consulting team. So I got to actually, present all this to the city by being part of the team developing their plan. And they kind of went for it. Once they understood what it was we were talking about, they were open to it. Sharing information and leveraging the dark sky community. And for those of you who don't know, the major player there is now called Dark Sky International. Used to be the International Dark Sky Association. Now it's Dark Sky International. And just doing the work project by project, and getting more people into the fight, right? It doesn't have to be a fight. Sometimes people are very open to it if they can be educated, like I think it was like you were saying, Steve. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Travis. Awesome.
All right, Ed, I see you're unmuted, Ed Lorenz.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First, I'd like to thank Dan Haggerty for his passion on this subject and for bringing it to the community. Very much appreciated by both Mary and myself. And to our speaker, thank you for being so articulate in your presentation. It was easy to understand. I appreciate that very much. I'd like to point out to the listeners and to the Midcoast Community Council that Pillar Point Harbor is considered a major roosting area for pelicans. In the fall, we have over 30,000 pelicans roosting on our breakwaters. The issue I have with Pillar Point Harbor is the high intensity lamps that are used by the fishing boats coming in and out at night. I have videos, which I'll send our speakers if you're interested, showing the birds being flushed off the rocks every time a boat comes in or out. Problem for pelicans is they're heavy birds, and when they try to land at night, they can break their legs or wings, and when they do that, they perish. So that's one thing I thought I'd bring to you. The previous question was going to be mine, which is how do you inform and engage the community about these problems, and especially our electeds? A few years ago, the community, our community here in Moss Beach, had the lights changed from your basic semi-operable yellow lights to high intensity LEDs. Even though we tried to stop it, we couldn't. I'd like to see our Midcoast Community Council take that up again, because we had dark skies over here 30 years ago when we moved to the coast. I think I'll leave that as my last comment, but thank you again to Midcoast for having this and appreciate it.
Next, we have Melinda McNaughton.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dan, for bringing this topic to the council's attention. And thank you, Travis, for a great presentation. I thought it was so clear and I learned so much. And I so agree that we need to protect wildlife with darker skies. And I truly hope that our county and our harbor district is open to consultation on this. And I hope we can make changes here to protect our very sensitive and unique habitat in the marine sanctuary and in our hills and wetlands. Thank you.
Yeah. If I can add a comment on sort of the last two about fixing these things as well, is that there are people, lighting engineers, who I work with, who get it and are doing their absolute very best to show how to make these changes. And sometimes I get called in. So for example, some development that's going to happen near a wetland, an estuary or two south of me right now. And the developer has kind of agreed to let me meet with their lighting designer and just try to accomplish the required lighting that they have to do under code, but do it in a different way that minimizes the spill and impacts. And I've done this with people before if they're willing, because if you get it early enough and the people are willing, we can often achieve the objectives with no additional cost and really no problem. It's retrofitting is harder, but if you can get somebody who can agree during the design process to just sit down and follow these best practices, or work with somebody to figure out what those best practices will be, we can make a big difference. And so there are people out there trying to do this. We've now got networks of manufacturers who are giving us lower color temperature lighting, and who are eager to, help people get the right lights to do the job in this way. Because there's still money to be made for these industries doing lighting right. And that's where, if we can catch it right during the planning process and get people to understand that, we do such a bad job that there's a ton of win-wins out there that if we could just get, we'd be in such better shape than we are today. Some things will take regulation. Right? I don't want to, discount the need for that, but some things we can actually do complete win-win if people just agree to do it.
Our last public comment, I see Marianne Giglio.
Yes, hi, thank you. My comment, or it's just two quick questions, I think, for Travis. And one of them is if there have been communities that you know of, because this obviously there can be rules that are made for government agencies to change their lighting, but have there been communities that you've worked with where personal property, where people themselves have also, where the community may have come in? Because there's one thing where you have the community buildings that have changed their lighting, but it's different when in a neighborhood, people have, the blue lighting and it's on all night. And then the second question is, I think that some people are concerned about security when lights are not on all the time. And is there any information that you have with your years in this, where is there really an issue if the lights are on a timer versus or motion detector?
Great. Great questions. So the first one was about how you would do regulation. So yes, there are two sort of sides of this. One is like the municipal lighting system, public buildings, street lights and whatnot, and the other is lighting on private property. Different places have different approaches. Ideally, you have both. So a place like Tucson has both because there's a observatory, and if they screw that up, they lose a bunch of money because the observatory can't do what it has to do. Flagstaff, same thing, has both. Aspen, Colorado right now is investigating doing a regulation of private property lighting, and in order to keep its ambiance. I'm not sure how much they're motivated by wildlife. I'm supposed to help them out a bit, and I've given them a similar spiel to this. Other places like Salt Lake City said, we're going to lead by example, and did the streetlight plan. But that then led to developers in certain areas going, you know what, we want to match what you're doing, and have our new development that's in this area that you've identified has a specific lighting scheme. We're going to match it voluntarily. So there are different approaches. Ideally, you have both. It all depends on the appetite of your elected officials. The second question is about security, and everybody worries about security. The interesting thing is that the literature on safety in the sense of crime is completely non-conclusive. There is no study that says light's always good and reduces crime. There are some studies that shows that it increases, some studies that shows that it decreases, some studies that shows that it moves from one place to another. And so it's not a good overall public policy to say we're going to reduce crime that way. Safety, on the other hand, like accidents and seeing obstructions in the roadway or whatnot, there are guidelines on that. And I work with and negotiate with people who work in that field to try to figure out how we can balance the wildlife and the safety issues. And the last one is on the security lighting thing. I would just say, if you feel that you need to light your place up for security reasons, first, learn a little bit about how bright you want to be so that you can see into the shadows. Otherwise, you're just creating places for people to hide. That's one. And second, if you can get, if if you're comfortable doing it, it is far better to put it on a motion detector. That way, you know, if the lights go on, it's something moving of a certain size, and you might want to pay attention to it. There is pretty good research from dark campus policies at schools that if you take a school site that's closed for the night and you turn it completely dark, you actually get decreased graffiti, and it's safer because anybody knows if they see a light after the curfew time that something hinky's going on. So that's what I can say about those two questions, and thank you for them.
Next is Natalie Down. Natalie,
Hi,
you're muted.
sorry. Yeah. Hi. I just want to say that was an incredible presentation. I learned a lot. I wanted to voice my support for us having a concerted effort to keep our dark skies, well, obviously, you know, nationwide, but particularly locally, as dark as we possibly can, for all the reasons that the wonderful speaker mentioned. One of my main concerns is there's a nursery halfway between El Granada and Half Moon Bay that has really quite egregious night sky lighting, continuously. And so I just wanted to kind of comment that was an issue that I'd spotted, and that maybe that's something that we could work together to help. Thank you.
Yep. That's a great point, and thank you for bringing it up. I mentioned a couple of things regarding that. One is that the brightest pixel measured from a satellite from our standard instrument west of Las Vegas in the United States is a tomato greenhouse in Ventura, California. It's seasonal, but it is so bright. You're like, what is that? When you look at the data, it's crazy. The other thing is that we find that there's also a lot of lights out in places from marijuana grows in wild areas, and that's not a good thing. And you can, however, legislate for there to be screens. These greenhouses can be built with shades, and it's just got to get legislated.
Okay, Dan, you among the council are first, but I just wanted to ask a question here. Why don't I just put red lights on my driveway?
Yeah, that'd be great. That's the least damaging color. And so in sensitive areas in the Netherlands now, the Philips, the company that used to be Philips has a product called Clearview Red that's been specially designed to minimize impacts to insects and bats. And it pretty much looks like a red light. And if I could pick one, but I don't think we're all ultimately going to live in what looks like a red light district, right? So I know that there's not going to be widespread uptake of that, but I would, from a wildlife perspective, I'd say, yep, absolutely. If you want something on that's on all the time, yep, do that.
Well, it won't be on all the time, but still. Dan, yep. you wanted to go.
Excuse me. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Dr. Longcourt, for your time. You know, I thought I knew a lot. Now I know a lot more. I really got a lot from your sharing tonight. One thing, and specifically that's extremely interesting, is you know, going to the reindeer with the two different color eyes. I have blue eyes, and I've always noticed that, you know, these super bright halogen headlights on the cars and any bright lights as I'm in nighttime, you know, even now they have these super bright red LED lights and they blind me. Is it because I have blue eyes? Am I more sensitive? Is it well, reindeer eyes are built a little differently. I'm going to say that no, but I should look into it more. But I will say one thing, or actually two things. One is that there's a very large variation within humans on how sensitive you are to light. So some people are like super sensitive and among all sorts of things, to brightness, in their ability to detect flicker.
because sometimes lights will flicker and most people see it as solid, but they detect the flicker and it just drives them bananas. And also in the sensitivity to your hormonal cycles that go with the daily. And I'm not talking about little differences. There's like a 50-fold difference between the most sensitive people and the least sensitive people. So we as humans are not widgets in this respect. And there's just a huge amount of variation. I don't think that's associated in humans with eye color. But now I'm intrigued and I got to go read some things.
Do we have other questions from the council? Ann?
I was interested in the information you were giving about increased breast cancer rates and prostate cancer rates. Can you expand on that a little, please?
Absolutely. So this was found originally in statistical associations between shift work and breast cancer. So nurses who worked the night shift and never slept in completely dark conditions, and they have an extremely elevated risk of breast cancer. Pilots often have this as well. And from there, it went out to looking at epidemiologically different populations with different levels of outdoor lighting, and found these statistical associations hold true. And it's for these two cancers in particular, and some others that we've researched, but these two because melatonin is that hormone that you produce at night in the dark. And some of you might take melatonin to help sleep. It's a natural thing. It's implicated in a whole bunch of things in the body. And one of the things that it is what's called an oncostatic hormone. Onco, cancer, static, in staying in place. So melatonin keeps incipient tumors from growing. And you might be familiar that most men over the course of their life, and many women, develop little proto tumors that never grow into anything. And part of the theory behind that is that by having a healthy production of melatonin at night, that keeps them from growing because any larger. That was then tested in the lab. A colleague of mine, David Blask in New Orleans. And what they did is they took human breast cancer tumors that were basically lab grown and grafted them onto mice, took blood from women who were either exposed to light at night or take the blood in the dark. And so that was blood with no melatonin and blood with high melatonin. And then they pumped the blood through those tumors that were living and growing in this lab environment. And they could document that if they had the blood from the women who were in the light, the tumors grew very rapidly. And if the blood from the women who were in the dark with high melatonin levels, the tumors did not grow rapidly. And so this was a mechanistic way to illustrate what they presume was going on. And his group has continued along these lines of research. Prostate cancer is a similar hormonal-based cancer and has that association. And we've also, looked at acute leukoblastic leukemia and found that there's a slight elevation from the areas that are maximally exposed to light at night. So it's a combination of lab studies. You can't do sort of controlled experiments with people because that's unethical. But you can do epidemiological studies, and everything points to the direction that circadian disruption and is associated with these and is a cancer risk. The international health associations have called shift work a probable carcinogen based on circadian disruption, which is sort of a fancy way around of saying that they're not sleeping in the dark, so they're not getting the physiological rest and recuperation that they need, and that the cancers are an outcome of that.
Thank you so much.
Other council, Gus.
First of all, thank you so much. That was a very informative presentation. You mentioned one of the actually precise legislative fixes was the idea of shades for greenhouses. I'm curious if you have a list of other precise legislative things that would help on this issue? And if you do, could you send that to us?
Well, let me just jump in here because while he was talking, I wrote him asking if he could send us examples of best practices in codes and ordinances, as well as vendors for exterior lighting for businesses and homes, which are dark sky compliant. So is that something you can share easily, Dr. Longclair?
So when we start getting into the full-on lists of everybody who's done things, Dark Sky International has a better list than I do. And they have also certified dark sky friendly fixtures. So when it comes to, I have some lists of like custom stuff because I was working with Caltrans to get well, I can tell you about this because it's in National Wildlife Magazine this month. So now it's public. I'm working with them on the Wallace-Annenberg overpass over the 101 freeway down in Los Angeles. And one of the issues that we're working on is the lighting and getting them to, not only create a dark path for the wildlife that's going to go over it, but we have to light under the bridge. And so we've made very specific recommendations, and I've been able to locate manufacturers who can use different colored lights than your typical roadway lighting that Caltrans is signed off on. So I have but that's not like consumer stuff. That's if you wanted a street light and a little bit of high-end area lighting. So I will share everything that I can in terms of some examples, but I just want to call out Dark Sky International as your sort of go-to source for those kinds of resources.
Well, will they have an explanation of what you're doing in Utah, for example?
I can send you the Utah Street Lighting Master Plan.
That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the council? Doctor, this was one of the best presentations we've ever had, and I hope we will follow through. If we needed to, could we call on you to present to the county, or should we just show them this presentation and Q&A?
Well, you're certainly welcome to share it. My general philosophy on this is if I can make a difference and I'm free, I'll do it. So yeah, if it's a county board of supervisors and they're going to listen, then let's set it up. I guess putting together presentations and talking in front of students for 25 years did a little bit of good. I appreciate the compliment.
Yeah, no, and we're very sensitive to this issue. And Dan, thank you for bringing this to us.
Dr. Longworth. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay. With that, our next issue is an update on local fuel reduction efforts and probably more. I know that Timothy Federal of the Resource Conservation District and Hannah, who has hung around, have some things to share. And Hannah, you're a co-host, so I'll turn to you to decide when to introduce Tim and what you're going to show.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're going to both be talking. I'm going to share some updates first, and then I'll turn it over to Timothy to also share some updates. So the first update that I wanted to start with was regarding the Southridge High Road. We had the project out to bid, and the costs that we got back for constructing the project were a lot higher than we had budgeted for. And so, this is a kind of factor of the current sort of status quo of construction at this point in time. Our Department of Public Works has also experienced this with projects that costs are a lot higher with cost of materials and cost of labor increasing. So for the time being, we have the project on hold and may consider going back out to bid at another time when construction prices might be a bit more favorable. But ultimately, at this point, had to make the decision to put that project on hold just because of the cost constraints. And then the second update in terms of fuel reduction, I will share a screen, share my one of my maps. Sorry, this is actually this one that I want to show. So we have plans to begin implementation of a 200-foot non-shaded fuel break in Quarry Park and Marada East, the southwest boundary area of the park. This is a project that is included in our wildfire fuel management program from 2001 and is a specific, 2021, and is a project that we also specifically included within the CEQA document and the coastal development permit that we recently got approved and finalized for Quarry Park fuel reduction efforts. And so we're planning to start to work with a contractor on implementation of this project starting this summer. And a big reason why we're also very interested in advancing this project is a lot of this area was pretty significantly impacted during the winter storms this year as well. In particular, Marada East. We include a large portion of Marada East in this area, but as most of you are probably familiar, a lot of the trees in this area already blew down in the winds that we had in March. And then we also have had to do additional tree removals already because of hazardous, structural defects or lean that we're seeing with other trees that were impacted by the wind. And so some of the work is less about, removing trees, more about cleaning up trees that have been impacted by the winds this winter as well. But the ultimate goal is this non-shaded fuel break along this boundary area. It would look very similar as an end product or kind of an end result to the fuel break that currently exists along the El Granada Boulevard area. That's a stretch where several years ago at this point, the eucalyptus canopy was removed. Native scrub species are still present and retained in that area, but there's a gap in the eucalyptus canopy essentially, and so that would be the intent for this area as well. We would be focusing on the eucalyptus and other tree species overstory, other non-native species that are in the understory, and then retaining as much native shrub understory as feasible. And we don't have a specific timeline for this quite yet because it will also depend a bit on the flow of work for the other project, which we are partnered with the San Mateo Resource Conservation District on, that has been in progress for Quarry Park for, this will be the third year that it's been in progress. And this map also helps just refresh where those work areas are. So this is the expansion and creation of shaded fuel breaks along fire roads within Quarry Park. This involves shaded fuel breaks within 100 feet on either side of the fire roads within the interior of the park, and select hazard tree removals within 200 feet of either side of the roads as well. And the areas mostly along Delphine and the top of Southridge Fire Road were completed last summer. In the summer of 2021, we also had work in this sort of red colored area. And then this coming summer as well, we'll be continuing largely in areas along the Middle Ridge and some other work along the South Ridge as well. And because we are not doing the South Ridge Fire Road construction project this summer, this area where we had some fuel reduction work planned as well will be eliminated for the time being, because access will be pretty difficult without there being a road present for equipment to get in. So we'll be shifting resources to other parts of the fuel reduction work planned. And so I think at this point, I'll also, call on Timothy to add anything else regarding the this project or anything else you wanted to update on for fuel reduction as well.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks for that update. Good to see you, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Timothy Federal, and I manage the Forest Health and Fire Resiliency Program at the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. And Hannah just gave a great update on the work that's occurring in Quarry Park. Just another brief thing to add is that we are planning on starting back implementation work in Quarry Park sometime in August to continue the shaded fuel break work and then continue on to start implementing the non-shaded fuel break work that Hannah outlined on the western boundary. For those of you that don't know, a shaded fuel break is a fuel reduction treatment type where small diameter vegetation underneath an existing tree canopy is removed and larger diameter trees are left to leave shade over that area. And it's meant to increase access for firefighting activities, possibly slow the spread of a fire, and improve evacuation access and things like that. If you have any more questions about shaded fuel breaks, I'm happy to answer them. So out of that work, I wanted to give an update on the Quarry Park project, as well as other work we're doing in the Midcoast, and then other work we're doing just countywide. One thing I wanted to update on was the El Granada scoping project. So this wildfire resiliency scoping project was completed last year, and we reported out to MCC on the results with our consultant Panorama. And the purpose of that project was to model the risk of wildfire coming to El Granada from the surrounding areas, as well as the effectiveness of potential management actions. And that report also made treatment recommendations based on the model results. In addition to the work that's occurring in Quarry Park and the additional work that we have planned in Quarry Park, both of which overlap with areas that were outlined in the scoping project, we've been working with private landowners and GGNRA, as well as Post and other partners, just to gauge interest and start the planning process for future projects that would align with the recommendations that came out of that project. There's a lot of things to consider when planning a fuel reduction project in these areas: access, permitting, CEQA, funding, and one thing that's emerging regionally as a big obstacle as well is biomass management. So in a lot of our projects, where we're removing vegetation for fire safety or for ecosystem restoration, we're struggling a little bit with what to do with that vegetation when we remove it. So we're having conversations regionally and kind of working to find regional solutions on that overall. But we'll continue to keep MCC updated on any projects that we begin to develop that come out of the scoping project. Other things to update on, the neighborhood chipper program for 2023 is in progress. Most of the coastside events have wrapped up. So far in 2023, we've served 370 homes, 84 homes in the Midcoast. Previously, this program was focused on high fire severity hazard zones that were identified by CAL FIRE and by Coastside Fire Protection District. We expanded the program this year due to increased demand from all of the winter storm damage that happened in the area. So 84 participants in the Midcoast is a lot more than we've had in the past. There are still a few events occurring countywide on the Bay Side and in La Honda and South Skyline area. But one thing that's important to note is that we have secured funding to continue this program in 2024 and 2025. So we're really excited about that. Other work we've been doing, we've been implementing a lot of hazard tree mitigation projects on the South Coast and some in the Midcoast as well. Again, driven by a lot of the storm damage we've been having, and most of those have been on private property. We've also coordinated with the Fire Safe Council, San Mateo Fire Safe Council, on some hazard tree removals in the Highway 35 corridor and Sneath Lane evacuation route. We are continuing the CEQA process for a 19-mile shaded fuel break around the community of La Honda. That's going to cross 23 different properties encircling that community. And we're targeting about 230 acres of fuel reduction treatment with that project, which is funded by CAL FIRE. And we're also in the midst of forest health project at Butno State Park. That's about 450 acres of redwood ecosystem restoration focused work after the CZU fire. That would have the added benefit of allowing prescribed burning to occur in Butno State Park over 2,000 acres as a maintenance tool and a habitat restoration tool. We've got about 50 acres of that project completed so far, and that's another CAL FIRE funded project that we're working on. And another exciting update is that this year we've collaborated with the California Natural Resource Agency and the USGS to have new LIDAR data collected for San Mateo County. And that is data that we will use to update our fine scale veg maps and our fuel models. The last time that data was collected was in 2017, except for in areas that burned in the CZU fire. So we're really excited that that new data set will allow us to really beef up our project planning tools and our data analysis for projects that we have already implemented and see the effect that they've had on the landscape. We've also, just a quick update because folks have asked, and so we've been invited to preliminary scoping conversations of the potential for a fuel reduction project along Highway 1 north of the Tom Lantos tunnels, between the tunnels and Pacifica, involving that project. Those conversations are involving San Mateo County, the RCD, Coastal Conservancy, and Caltrans. We're just working on scoping the project, what it would look like. There's a lot of work occurring along that corridor that's not fuel related, around slides and high-speed internet and all of those things. So there's a lot of considerations for that project, but it is something we are in the scoping phase of. I think that's it for all my updates. We'd be happy to.
Okay, let me jump in here, Timothy. First, thank you for coming and sharing those updates. I think you could have heard a muted cheer in this room when you talked about doing something about the evacuation route north of the Lantos Tunnel. That has been a problem we identified 5 years ago and again in October of 2020. And I know it's a complex ownership situation, but as we saw in this storm, it's critical to our survival and the ability of first responders to get here. So, bless you for that. We would appreciate knowing as soon as possible if there's anything we need to do to help puncture the, barriers. And similarly, with respect to the scoping project that was done in El Granada, the priority 1 zone, I think it was called a project, but priority 1 zone was, I think, called Deer Creek and a strip of eucalyptus next to El Granada Boulevard, which the residents that we call the wildfire warriors have been asking about for years. Hannah showed a fuel break on her map, but last I saw, that really did not go up the slope, which is very steep. And so we want to know what we can do to get this priority 1 project, especially that swath of trees, called the swath, next to the homes on El Granado Boulevard, addressed as soon as possible. So please tell us how we can help, whether it's asking for funding, whatever you need. We would really want to explore that. I see a comment here from one resident who objects to it. So obviously we'd have to hold a community hearing on it. But I can tell you that there's extreme concern about those trees, both from a fire point of view and also from knocking down the PG&E poles and the electricity. I believe one resident counted 24 times that the wires cross El Granado Boulevard. I might be exaggerating a little, but it was dozens of times. Those wires are winding their way up the hill, and so the falling of trees is a problem. Okay. Lastly, the LiDAR data, that is actually important. And I'm wondering if you are involved with Vibrant Planet, who did the simulation on that study. Do you plan on using Land Tender, their software product, for assessing risks and analyzing trade-offs? Or do you have some other simulation tool that you're using to take advantage of that new LiDAR data?
Great question. So the collection of the LiDAR data is being managed by the USGS, and it will be publicly available. We have put in a grant application for a CAL FIRE wildfire resiliency planning grant that would actually fund a project to utilize that LiDAR data to do exactly what you're saying. I'm not sure the exact tool of the Land Tender. I'd be happy to hear more about that tool, but to actually use that LiDAR data and transform it into updated veg maps, updated fine scale fuel models, and all of that stuff. So yes, that is the goal.
Okay. I see typically we take questions from the community first. I wasn't unaware of any, but I see now Sid Young has raised her hand, and then Burnett here has the question. So let's get Sid and Burnett and then go back to the council. Sid?
Hi. Sorry, I'll wait for you to recognize me, I guess.
I did. I just recognized you.
Am I recognized, Greg?
Yes. Sid,
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. It shut off. It was staticky. Sorry, I'm a little late to the meeting. I went to the Rick Lohman memorial service. Okay, so Hannah, I apologize to ask this now because I fell in my garden when you were at the last MCC meeting. But when you did the Quarry Park dog survey, did you say how many tickets they wrote to people without their dogs on leash in that study?
Greg, would you like me to address that?
Yeah, please. You gave us a table of statistics, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't issue any tickets in Quarry Park for dogs off leash. The only tickets we've issued to date are regarding dogs on Ross's Cove Beach.
Okay, and up on the Pillar Point Bluff where they weren't supposed to be off leash, are you enforcing up there?
We're enforcing, but we use an education approach and informational approach. So in terms of specifically issuing citations or a ticket, the only ones that we've issued to date have been for dogs on the beach at Ross's
down
Cove.
on the beach. And am I to understand that now they'll be allowed on the trail through the trees in Fitzgerald or not? I may misread that.
They've always been allowed on the Dardanelle Trail, which is part of the Coastal Trail. I don't believe that's part of the Cypress Grove. I think the Dardanelle Trail.
Lower trail. What about the Bluff Trail?
No dogs on the Bluff Trail, just the Dardanelle.
The Dardanelle Trail used to go from Cypress over to the Dardanelle Trail used to go from Cypress over to where the bridge was. And then the other trail starts right at the top near the Steel Cove Stairs and runs right the bluff. But that trail has a marker that says no dogs allowed in park. So they're only allowed on the Dardanelle Trail. Is that what you're saying? Not on the Bluff Trail?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't hear you because of the static. That's
All right.
it. That's
Burnett,
my question.
Burnett's here in person. I'd like to go to Burnett.
Just a point of information, just before I came to the meeting, I noticed that the Parks Department had dumped a lot of documents yesterday having to do with the fuel reduction that they're doing in Quarry Park, as well as some comments that people made and the responses that were provided having to do with the fire road. And the other thing was interests me, the fact that they're adding another toilet next to the pump track. So just an information item that if you're interested, there's like 6 or 8 documents that have been put on yesterday discussing all of this stuff.
Okay, thanks, Burnett. Natalie Down?
Hi,
Natalie?
yeah, I just wanted to raise my hand to ask about the making sure that we are having as little damage on the ecosystem as we can, whilst obviously I understand the need for safety and fire prevention, but I would really encourage the board to think very deeply about how we can limit the interaction on bird nesting season and bat maternity and bat hibernation season, and looking at maybe doing the fuel reduction work in like September, October rather than in summer.
I believe that's been discussed before, and I believe that is under consideration. And there's a lot more to be discussed. I know people at El Granada are of 2 different opinions when it comes to removing trees, so I don't think anything is settled there. Jane, you're muted.
Hi, just a quick comment. I really like the fact that Greg said there'd be another meeting if there is some work on Deer Creek. I don't believe that the study really looked, I think it looked only at wildfire and not at flooding. And that creek, number one, it takes a lot of water and flows very, very beautifully. We did not have flooding on Vallejo Street because that creek was so solid. But because flooding was not taken into account, I hope that that will be if a project is looked at. And something nobody talks about, we were rezoned for the tsunami maps were changed. But nature's quite unpredictable right now, as we all know. And I've always known that if there is a tsunami, that ocean water is coming up the creeks. So the stability of the soil becomes incredibly important for us that live on there, and especially the people in Lower El Granada where that creek runs right through their backyard. So I hope if anything's going to be discussed about wildfire, and I do respect the people that are next to the trees up there on in the hills, but that the flooding be really looked at. Thank you.
Melinda?
Yeah, thanks. My question is about the fire break in the lower part of El Granada that you spoke about, Tim. It's a non-shaded fuel break, it sounds like. Is that correct? And then the other question is, how do you keep the fuel breaks and fire breaks from growing back? And is that manual labor? Is it herbicides, or is it both?
Good question. I think so. You are correct that it is a non-shaded fuel break. So it'd be a 200-foot, I believe, swath of full tree removal, although understory vegetation would be left to remain, native understory vegetation. And yes, you're correct that that project would require, and any fuel break would require follow-up maintenance. That maintenance would consist of whichever method would be the most effective from an ecological, most effective and least impactful from an ecological and monetary perspective. So it could include mowing, maybe selective herbicide treatment where appropriate, typically like a stump treatment of an herbicide instead of us, spraying a whole swath. That would probably be avoided. And Hannah can probably speak better as to what maintenance methods are included in the county parks CEQA documents.
Yeah, so Timothy, you touched on the main things. Like we, for maintenance, it's not so much about preventing all regrowth. We do want there to be native species regeneration happening, but a lot of our maintenance of fuel break areas is focused on preventing some eucalyptus resprouting because they are rapid resprouters from, cutting those, stumps. So that's one aspect of it. And a most effective tool for that is, like Timothy mentioned, a stump application of triclopyr, which is a chemical an herbicide that we use for woody species. And then we use other mechanical methods, like we've done mowing for species like broom and ivies. It depends on the species because there's different efficacy for different types of species, but a lot of our maintenance is focused more on invasive plant management because they're more rapidly regrowing in those areas and have a bit more likelihood of sort of overtaking desired native vegetation.
Thanks, Hannah. And if I could, I just want to address Natalie's comment earlier about bird protections quickly. And I totally agree, Natalie. I also am a big fan of birds myself. And all of our permitting documents have, strict considerations for bird nesting season in particular, as well as bats and lots of other wildlife. We do nesting bird surveys, very detailed nesting bird surveys by skilled biologists for all of our projects, especially if they're occurring during nesting bird season. We flag off any nests that we find and continue to monitor them until birds have fledged from the nest. So we really do work to take every precaution possible that we can when working within those windows.
Kellex Nelson was here with her hand raised, but it's now gone down. So I just wanted to ask Kellex, if you're still there, did you want to make a comment?
Oh, thank you. Timothy made it for me. Thanks.
Okay, great. And Natalie, are you raising your hand again?
Yes, could I quickly respond and ask another question? I wonder, thanks for Timothy for addressing that about birds. I would love to know what measures and surveys that have been done regarding the bats in the area and their patterns and behaviors. And also, I want to make sure that we stick to the idea that we have like the qualified biologists on site for tree removals. But yeah, so that was 2 points: the biologists, but also what surveys have been done for bats.
Yeah, and I can't answer the what surveys have been done for bats off the top of my head beyond what is built into our permitting documents, which do have specific protections for bats. But I can follow up with you and provide you that information. And yes, we do have qualified biologists on site surveying all of our project work for bats, for frogs, for birds, for lots of flowers, botanists, all those good things that we want to continue to protect.
Great. I'm also happy to help liaise for bat surveys.
And Natalie, I can speak to the bat thing as well. It is very similar to the nesting bird surveys. We are looking for the biologists who are on site are looking for trees or other vegetation that has potentially suitable roost structure or signs of roosting. And those are also flagged for avoidance, like bird nests.
Okay, do we have comments from the council now? Kimberly first.
A different kind of question for Timothy about Boudinot State Park. I've been down there a few times over the course of this month, just sort of looking to see how the work is progressing. And there's two things of concern to me. First of all, I noticed that workers often, when they're finishing their work, speed down the roads adjacent to and behind the park, sometimes hitting wildlife and killing it. And I'd just like to mention that so that you can maybe get a handle on people being a little more careful. And then the second thing is I noticed that even though the park, I think, is closed right now, that was unclear to me. there are quite a few visitors who are going in and hiking. And I noticed that some of them are on trails that have plant life that is marked for herbicide use. So my understanding was that that was going to be clearly marked and those places would be closed to people. And I've seen quite a few visitors hiking on those trails. So could you answer that question?
So the park isn't closed currently. We had some work occurring intermittently, doing some invasive plant control, and those are trail closures that only last about a day or so for each area where the work is actively occurring, but we don't keep the trails closed long term. We only have the trails closed while the crews are out doing the invasive plant control work, and then reopen the next day. So it's intermittent trail closures while that was going on. But currently, there's no park-wide closure in place. And those trail closures were posted with signage in the park as needed.
So, Hannah, I'm a little confused. I was talking about Woodno State Park. Are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
No worries. Yeah, the volume was a little low right when you started speaking, so we couldn't quite pick up the beginning of your question. But no worries. So thanks for letting me know about the concerns about the workers speeding. I'll definitely raise that. The park is closed, and I'm not sure what state parks enforcement mechanism is for keeping people out of the park, but the park is meant to be closed. The flagging that you're mentioning, I'll need to check with our project manager. The flagging may be flagging vegetation that's set for mastication versus herbicide use. We are definitely having clearly marked trail closures within active project areas, where anywhere where there's machinery or surveys occurring. And so there shouldn't be people in those areas, but if that's something you're seeing, please let me know.
Thank you. That's all.
Next council member, Scott.
Hey, Anna, I just have two questions for you. You mentioned the second point you mentioned it as a 200-foot fuel break project. And so that's 200 feet from, like, for instance, the road in?
Correct.
Okay. The other comment I have is it would be awesome if you guys could control the vehicles that are entering Quarry Park from Miranda East that are not Park Service vehicles. So I'm up there from time to time, and I mean, I've the last time I was up there last week, there were some kids in a 4-wheel drive riding up the fire road, and I'm pretty sure that they were not authorized Park Service people up there. So, and I'm sure you're aware that I think it's Santiago, you can just drive right onto the fire road, and then off you go into the park if you want to, right? So a fence or a gate would be awesome up the road a little bit, so you just can't enter the park unless you can unlock it.
Great, I'll flag that to our rangers and see if we can find a solution.
Cool, thank you.
Any other council members?
It's just
Dan.
an appropriate fence, a well-designed gate. You're talking about a gate.
A gate, yeah.
Yeah, just the minimum needed to prevent a car and blending in with the park.
Okay. I believe we're done. I want to thank Hannah and Timothy for coming. Timothy, I'm going to get you some information on the Vibrant Planet thing. As a matter of fact, I think we might hold a session because I continue to have questions about the county wildfire management practice. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now we have a public comment here that I did not read earlier because I didn't want to keep our speakers any later at night, but we're supposed to read public comments that were sent.
Just thinking about it.
Right. So this was from Deborah Lardy. It's about the dark sky thing, and I want to read it because she asked it to be read. Dear Council, she couldn't attend tonight. She wanted to comment. She's thrilled. You are having a presentation by Travis Longcore on the issue of the impact of lighting on the environment, including all living creatures. This important topic is often overlooked or trivialized in urban planning and development. We have local instances of inaction, such as the recently built fire station in El Granada, where the carefully planned and specified lighting was not complied with by the builder and never corrected by county enforcement after numerous complaints. As a result, the LEDs are now seemingly permanent in that location with their negative impact. It is critical government officials and residents are educated on the topic and that we collaborate to make the world a healthy place for all of us. Thank you for your efforts in this behalf. Deborah Lardy Montera, member, International Dark Sky Association. Okay. So with that, I'm prepared to turn to the council activity. And Claire, I know you had something you wanted to bring up, so I'm just going to start with you. And then I'm going to bring up the budget, and then we'll go around the table for the rest of you.
This is just, when we started the year, we talked about the role of the MCC in vetting referrals from the planning department. And we kind of let things ride for a while to see who might be interested in serving on this group, because it is a group that represents the MCC. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood who was going to be working on this. And at this point, Kimberly and Ann and I will be reviewing referrals. All the referrals will be sent to every member of the council. Everybody has a chance to look at them. If anyone wants to agendize them, just, let Greg know, but the routine comments from the MCC will be coming from the three of us, unless there's any objection.
So that's an important point. This is a sort of hidden extra work that's been going on for years that we do to participate in the planning review process. So just so you know, they can comment after their review unless one of us contacts them because we have some specific need for something other than what they're planning on saying.
They can't contact us because it's a Brown Act.
Oh, how do we make those comments then? We they contact me and I agendize it. All right. Thank you. Dan?
And I just remember there was a request to have some kind of I don't know, software so that we could view some of these files. It was better. And, even if we're not on the committee, we should still be able to view them if we choose to. Was there any advancement in that, or is we still kind of waiting for county?
I don't think it's up to the county to do it. We probably should be able to do it ourselves. We haven't done it. When we send the comments, everybody on the council gets a copy of the comment. But having everything in one place where you can go back and look and see what was said easily, I think is a really good idea, and we should do that.
But also more important, I think, for me, is to clearly understand what the project is, be able to read the blow up the prints, see the drawings and the design.
If you go to the FCC website under planning, and just when you get a referral that comes to everybody, just plug in that referral number, it'll give you all that stuff. It's right there.
So that's the gateway to viewing. Okay.
Let me know if you're trouble.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Claire. I wanted to also mention I had an action item to update the budget. It's always hard for me to remember what I'm supposed to do, and these action items don't come out until the minutes come out, which is sometime later.
Are you picking on me?
No, not totally. I'm also laying the groundwork for having an action item request system where we could log things immediately and know what we're all supposed to do rather than waiting on minutes, which I realize are a labor of hours of work. All right. So the budget, I just have reorganized this and I added the post office box, which people wanted. I just want to give you a feel. We still only get $3,000 a year, which is fine because even with an estimated $500 for office supplies and miscellany, we still have a margin of $1,460 a year, depending on the software costs. All right. I have proposed in the budget, and I would like to get a sense of council here to either put this to bed or to action this. Right. So I'm not calling for a vote. What I'm calling for is, would it be willing to take the next steps to bring some of these items to the council for a vote? So one item is creating an issue management site which would cost about $1,000. I've got estimates for less, for some web person to help take an existing, they're called customer relationship management, they're called bug tracking systems. There's a bunch of different names. One of these software packages, and install it as an adjunct to our website. It would not change our website, but it would be accessible through the website. And then there'd be some license fee for the software every year. Okay. One package that one of the vendors found was recurring $500 for unlimited users. A lot of others have per user charges. My thought was that this thing would be used by the community and the council, and we would give Mike O'Neill and Ray Mueller and Gina and a whole bunch of people their logon IDs. And then when we would log issues, like, fix the stormwater runoff from Quarry Park and Santa Maria, that we would have a record of when we did it, who we sent it to. They would reply by telling us who it's assigned to. Okay. Give us some feedback on when we could expect a reply. The reply might be, we're not doing anything, but at least give us a reply on what their response is. And then if it is going to move forward, then they could start assigning the Department of Public Works or whoever is going to be involved. And we could see this. I'm aware that we have issues that have been around for years that we just sort of forgotten about. Right. I mean, they come up every once in a while, but why not have a little more proactive list? So I'm pushing for this. I think we can afford it. $1,000 out of Dan, $13,000 in the bank, was it? Okay. For one time, and then $500 a year. And if we only call this a pilot and it blows up, well, I'm sorry, but it was $1,500 investment in the first year. And I would like to try it. My question to the council is, before I go running around getting software packages and trying to arrange demos, is the council willing to consider this? Going around the table, and maybe you should just raise hands. Yes, if you would consider it. We have 3 that would consider it, 4 that would consider it. I'm 5.
Consider it, as long as it's very clear on all the possible pros and cons and the other options that might be less money.
You can count on me to look for the cheapest approach, Dan.
We also need sign on from the other people who we're sending this to, like Mike O'Neill's office.
Right.
Ray Mueller's office. We need to get that part of their SOP. Look at it every week or every month. And if they have
a well-designed package will send an email to everybody that should get one, notifying them that an issue's been created, and that they're involved, and it will give them a link so that they could log on, see it, comment on it, etc. All right, Kimberly.
And you checked with the county to make sure there was no system that they could extend to us.
Kimberly, are you saying that in 2023, the San Mateo County does not have an issue tracking system?
Well, I'm asking.
Well, they do have something called Acela, which is used in the planning department. But the replies I got indicated no such system exists outside of the referral and planning process in 2023. Would you like me to describe how in 1985 I built my own on a PC for a company I was with? Okay. All right. All right. So I won't talk about that. All right. Then I also mentioned the question about getting license fees or software so that we all could edit PDF files and work smoothly. Dan, your question was one of them. I don't know what to ask for here. I pulled up some numbers on what it took to get Adobe licenses. I'm going to just explore this with Mike O'Neill and whoever he can drag in, because I think he said there was a possibility that there was something we could use, but every one of us should be able to use a spreadsheet that we produce, right? I mean,
I think we need to have an agenda item to identify the problems, and there may be, all the problems.
Correct. But all I'm asking for now is the council interested in pursuing this, or should I just let it die? Okay. So raise your hand if you're interested in having me agendize this and bring it forward for use by council members. Okay, fine. So, and then my favorite topic, which you may have heard me raise several times, was about getting the emergency walkie-talkie communication systems. I've raised the price tag on this because I've been advised at the Emergency Preparedness Day when we were there, the CERT booths were right next to us, that we should get a little more powerful version. But it's going to require some training, which would be provided for free by my pals at CERT. I'm CERT certified. You don't all have to go through CERT certification and 40-hour courses and all that stuff, but you would have to spend an hour or so being trained on how to push a button on a walkie-talkie. The question is, do you want to be bothered with this? Okay, some people could say, we're not paid. There's a CERT people to do this. We don't need it. I just felt it would be irresponsible of me for not raising the issue that I could not communicate effectively during that last blackout in January. And I don't feel comfortable that way, but maybe that's just me. So is this something you want me to pursue to burn another potential $1,200 of our 13,000 savings or not?
I think we need more information before you ask it. We're supposed
All
to-
I said was raise it for
supposed to have
discussion.
an Agenda item on this.
Right.
Hasn't happened, but I got a lot of questions.
Okay,
on that,
so is it something the council is willing to have me bring people in to agendize and explain, or is this like, no, I really wouldn't use it. Let's not waste the money. Okay, raise your hand if you are.
I might use it, but I need the information.
Okay, so that's one.
Yes.
Need a lot more information. So.
All right, so you're borderline. Okay, so I hear two borderlines, maybe three borderlines and me, but other people know. So I'm going to drop this. I'm going to drop this until there's more support. All right. I'm not going to put it on the time.
I think I'm borderline because I don't really understand. When we talked about this last time, there seemed to be some emphasis on importance of us being trained in CERT. So you're
Not in CERT as the full, just in the operation of the walkie-talkie and the communications network. I mean, it's really.
About training or purchasing equipment?
I'm asking both. If we were to purchase it, would people agree to be trained on it? Occasionally, attend a Tuesday night, 7 p.m. session, joining in to prove that their device still works and just be ready to use it in the case of an emergency. That's the question. I don't hear a lot of support, so I'm just going to wait on this one. Okay. Everybody's borderline. All right. So that's the bulk of the budget. There are some other things that I want to bring up, but I should really bring these up with Ray and Mike, which is, should we be paid for our meeting attendance, or failing that, should we get the administrative time to support us taking minutes, updating the website, which Lisa's been doing. A lot of the things that we do, we could spend our time instead on reviewing plans or contriving action plans for the priorities. I know I burn a lot of hours just doing admin work that could be done by administrative staff. So I'm not going to ask for any decision on that. I'm just telling you, I'm concerned about that. So that was my share on the budget. And while I'm rolling, I'll just mention you have emails from me today documenting that we are advancing, getting support for a community fiber network. Half Moon Bay has repeatedly agreed to this. You heard Harvey talk. I have shared with you a couple of the endorsement letters I've gotten. My strategy is to get endorsement from other local agencies and go to the county with a support package. And that is happening. We are also in touch with the Peninsula Pescadero Municipal Advisory Council, PMAC, for the first time since Claire, I think, went with Michelle a year or two ago. I don't know when. You talked to PMAC a while ago.
We got a drink.
Yeah, so we're in touch with them. Leo Gomez is having a session tomorrow with a woman who's been assigned to work with us on the community fiber network. We're going to try and make sure they understand the situation and write a letter of endorsement and maybe extend the definition of the community fiber network down to Pescadero. We'll see. Okay, but that's also going on. I think that's all I want to mention. Oh, wait a minute. Why not? Why not? Go ahead. Go ahead. I recognize it. I know. But look, this in the spirit of community engagement, I'm willing to let him speak.
Just with regards to budgetary issues, and Mr. Terry brought up earlier concerns of what I'm here for Civic Bell being a monetary concern on the budget. I'd like to just verbally say, for now in the foreseeable future, especially in a small local volunteer district like this, something like Civic Bell would have no strain upon the budget, just to address that comment much earlier in the session as it regards to budget and the discussion of software purchase. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, so now maybe around the table on council member activity, Gus.
Yeah, there was the follow-up about asking Tim Fox about I think I went overlapping groups I read through the minutes and I couldn't figure out what our specific question. I know we had a concern about it, but I couldn't identify what the specific question actually was. And I just felt like I don't want to send him an email unless I know exactly specifically what it is we're asking. So do we remember, like as a group, like what that, because I will write it down right now and ask him if we can remember exactly what the precise question is that we have for him.
Or do you want to?
No, but Len is here. I think I'd involve Len.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say. I think the question was because when Lynn proposed his grouping subgroups for the
Transportation.
issues. There were several subgroups, and my question was, is there a problem if members of subgroups overlap in some way? So if you've got 3 different subgroups on transportation of different members, is that a problem?
Okay, so Lenin, as I recall, divided into Moss Beach, Montera, and El Granada.
Yes.
Okay, and so your question is, can someone serve on both groups? A council member.
It's not necessarily that. I mean, of course, that would be an obvious one, I think, but because it's part of a larger whole, if you've got 3 different subgroups with 3 different people who then overlap on other subgroups.
So you're saying is the unit the subgroup or is the unit the group?
I think there's 2 different questions there.
Well, each subgroup is supposed to study the problem it's assigned and bring it to the council for discussion.
Right, but it's under the umbrella of the larger transportation, so.
What umbrella, what subgroup is that? Is there?
I guess that's my question.
I don't see it.
Parts interrelate.
Not yet, until you bring them to the council. There's subgroups studying aspects of transportation, and then you bring them to the council.
Maybe I've misunderstood something.
That's what I see. Wait a minute, we have comments in chat. Maybe somebody's addressing this.
Len had his hand up. He has it up again.
Oh, he does? Len, go.
Yeah, the overall setup that I talked about initially was a meeting of Kimberly, who I looked to speak about Moss Beach and Montera, bleeding over into the east side, west side as well. And then for Gus, El Granada, and Miramar, there's a boundary of 2 major Caltrans projects that fit with that framework. And then we had an initial meeting, Greg, with you, Kimberly, and Gus, as well as Mike, to go over that. And basically, that was just a communication group. It wasn't having any issue discussions. And it's important for you as chair to stay plugged in at that level. I see overall, though, within this framework, the point that a committee forms to, let's say, write a letter, you can form those around several of those around the transportation as an overall topic. And I don't believe there's a conflict between different people being on those. I don't know if that helps you, Kimberly, or not.
Well, if I'm the only one that's concerned about this and we don't think there's a problem, then I'm okay with that. But
that's my feeling.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. But, I don't want to tie anybody's hands. I appreciate you raising concern. Okay.
Can I just say one other thing?
Yes, Gus, in your mic.
Right. About the admin thing, just I'm not optimistic we will get much in that respect. So I'm just curious, like trying to brainstorm other ideas, like what about we tried to get like an intern or something that, like, if we just as a council like reached out to like Skyline College or something like that and tried to get an intern and we could maybe help with some of that stuff.
Okay.
Is that something worth pursuing?
Well, of course it's worth pursuing. And just imagine if I didn't exist. And then figure out what you want to do. Okay. Just figure out what you want to do, because I won't be here forever. Okay. Kimberly, did you have more?
Just as our going round.
Yeah, I'm going around.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't think I have anything to report. I will let people know that the Coastal Commission meeting is this week. It started today, and the second part is tomorrow. And there were several items that I think a community member sent us an email just letting us know about that. which I can't remember.
The one about the whale skeleton and the fencing being done on Seal Cove?
No.
No, that was not it. It was a policy thing. At any rate, it was on the agenda for today, and if anybody's interested, you can go back and look at the exact portion of the agenda for that meeting to look at it.
On to Ann.
So I attended the Board of Supervisors as well as the tenant protection. This Board of Supervisors, I attended just a portion of it, but some very interesting information came out of it. And two things. One, there is going to be a bond measure on the 2024 ballot asking for homeowners or property owners to fund basically affordable housing. And so it'll be a new assessment per house. It was reported on the news. There's two different amounts that I've been told. So I'm not exactly sure on the amount, but they reported this on the news tonight. That was between $75 to $100 for every $500,000 of assessed value on the home. So that's what you would be assessed at for your property if you are a property owner. The county, for offering up this ballot measure, they get a tenth, I think, of it. So they would be able to take about $1 to $2 billion of the money, and they're seeking to be able to expand how the general obligation bonds can be used, because right now it's a little narrower. So they want to be able to open it up and basically use the money. They also are trying, I guess, at the state to, instead of having a 2/3 majority vote, they want to be able to have a simple majority, so that
For bond approvals?
for bond approvals. So, and I'm assuming for most things, but for bond approvals at the moment. So that's what they're seeking to change, do a constitutional change. So then it would just be a simple majority. So just to let everybody know, heads up, because your bills could go up.
That one applies to all tax increases, not just bonds.
Did you say that into the mic?
Oh,
The one that Ann's talking about there applies, as I understand it, to all tax increases, not just bonds. So lowering the threshold from 2/3 to simple majority.
Are you saying the government wants to make it easier for them to spend more money?
Yep, that is exactly what I'm saying.
All right. I just want to be sure I understood that thrust of this comment. Is that it, Ann? Go.
One more. The Moss Beach, the firehouse, as we had at a previous meeting, they are going to have a public meeting July 26th, which is the same night as ours, at 6 p.m. And it's going to be an open session for the community to come in, and it's kind of a question and answer session, and they're going to have poster boards and things up. So it will be a community meeting at 6 p.m. July 26th.
Is that in person?
It's in person at the fire station.
What does the council want to do about that? I mean, I'm not eager to move our next meeting up to the 19th. I mean, I'd be open to moving it a day or two, like Tuesday or Thursday. I don't know what everybody's schedule is, but is that something that the council thinks is important enough that we as a group defer to their meeting and move ours? Or is that something that we're just going to let go on and we'll hear about it in the video?
So not that it matters, but I just want to let you know, I will certainly attend.
Okay. And how long will it last?
That I don't know. I asked Gary, he gave me the email and he didn't have an agenda for it. So I don't know exactly.
All right. So we're going to authorize Ann Rothman to have an excused absence to attend this other meeting and report back to the council for sure. All right, Claire has nothing. Scott, council member activity.
Kimberly and I met to start working on the Montero Mountain fire road damage assessment of what we're going to do about it in the future. So one of the first things that we talked about was who are the people that we should be addressing and with respect to what organization. So I've been looking at a map to try to determine who owns that portion of Montero Mountain, and we'll go directly to them. Who's responsible for it? Because there's many owners of all of that. So And so we could, go ahead.
Well, I got an email from Dave Cosgrave with a copy to Don Mattei, who's the head of Department of Emergency Management.
Okay.
And if you remember, Mr. Barnett was moved out of the picture and said we should address questions to Don.
Yes.
But now Dave has written me, and I don't know if I failed to copy the two of you, but I said we're going to be working on this issue. I think his question was something like, are we going to address the owners about the subsequent work planned? Well, I don't know who the owners are. So I think what I will do is, if with your permission, I will take his email and copy the two of you in and have you get back to Dave Cosgrave because you want to know some of the stakeholders there. Because we could, does that make sense?
So, yes, and so the saddle that we're most concerned about is owned by one of those groups. And I can tell you exactly what it is right now. It's like, it's a California state thing. It's a specific group that falls in the spot that we are most interested in.
Okay.
So, but like, again, I take the information you gave us, talk to that person, and then come back with Kimberly and we'll be more specific.
All right.
Who we will target.
Okay. Council member activity. Is that all for you? Council member activity wise?
Yes.
Okay. Dan.
Let me just say on the fire station, I'd like to attend too. And so
on the fire station in
the open house.
Yes.
Somebody else might have to set up.
Could we
Or-
start our meeting like at 7:30 to allow an hour and a half for the other meeting?
Yeah, I think we can start later.
One thing is to consider how many priority agenda items there will be for it.
Well, let's move right
Have a
smoothly.
buy, maybe have a buy. I don't know.
Let's move smoothly into future agenda items, which is the very next topic. We have a long-term item on the issue of Cypress Point housing development. I believe the hearing is tomorrow afternoon. I'll be going. That's just for reviewing the architecture. I think we need a work group to do a more broad assessment. For those of you caught up on the emails, they're very much limiting what they're discussing tomorrow. They're avoiding all the tough topics about stormwater and as I understand, even traffic and the EIR that hasn't been done. They're proposing a design before they've even done an EIR. Okay, so I think we're going to have to do a work group on this. We also had something for Harbor and Shoreline, Kimberly. I don't remember what you were going to bring up, but I know there's action on Surfers Beach. Is that something that has to happen on the 26th? Is it planned? Is it ready to go?
So the problem is, I'm still trying to get a speaker who would be able to answer questions.
Okay, that was Len Matterman who couldn't make it.
Correct.
Right.
So until I have a confirmation of a speaker, I can't really, I can't nail down a date.
Would it help?
No.
Would it help if you gave me a list of your discussion topics and I wrote Len? I mean, I've met him.
No.
Okay. Okay.
No, it's not a matter of him not wanting to come. I think it's just that it's
Scheduling.
low on the priority list of the things that they have to deal with. But
Did we make it a higher priority?
That's where I was volunteering to get
I think
involved.
it's going to be a higher priority.
Okay, well, so that's fine.
He's kind enough to share his slides from the presentation to the Harbor District, and we can absolutely use those if we want. But I think it is important to have somebody who's more of an expert than any of us to be able to answer questions. And that's I have two possibilities, and that's the point of follow-up.
All right, so we will not consider that right now for the July 26th. I did want to bring the stormwater issues on July 26th because I've been waiting to get this report out. We have massive contributions from people like Burnett and the people on Montero on 2nd Street. I have contributions from Seal Cove and Moss Beach and Carlos Street, and I can't remember all the places. I have been unable to get anything out of Pescadero, although I did have a tour with Joaquin Jimenez of Half Moon Bay. I mean, not Pescadero, unable to get anything out of Moonridge. And I think there's some reasons people don't want their names mentioned, okay, which we could all imagine, but there's an issue there. There's issues all over. So I did want to move forward on getting a report in front of you. Whether I'll have a complete draft of the report, which could run 50 pages by the time we're done, and literally hundreds of videos and pictures, at least we could have a slideshow and we could discuss the situation and what we want to ask the county to do. Okay. So that I'd like to have on the 26th, but I'm on Claire.
I really don't, I'm not interested in talking about Moon Ridge.
Because it's not in our jurisdiction.
It's not my jurisdiction.
Okay. The reason I covered it was because they're unincorporated and it doesn't seem anybody else is helping them. So that's why I was going to bring it up. But if you don't want to talk about Moon Ridge, that's fine.
So going back up a second, you want to bring something on the 26th?
I want to have a stormwater issues discussion on the 26th. Then we had the Montero Mountain update, and you already brought that up. I think it's going to take you a lot longer than 2 weeks to get your research done. Okay, I think this is an August discussion.
Okay.
It's my guess.
Possibly. The other thing to August is the glyphosate concern.
I was going to ask you. Yes.
The El Granada community members have asked that we push that to the last meeting in August. Mostly because some of them have vacations and there are other things that they're navigating that make them unavailable.
What I need is somebody to put proposed dates in front of me and Scott so that we write them down and I don't lose track of them. Right now, it's just floating.
So this would be our last meeting in August, which would
Be the 23rd.
the 23rd.
I'm guessing. All right.
So August 23rd is the possible glyphosate.
Right. And then we have issues on the telecommunications follow-up. You heard me talk about the cooperative stuff we've been doing. At some point, the council needs to write a letter that asks the county for money to fund the start of the feasibility study.
So for what again?
Telecommunications, broadband. I think at the next meeting, I can bring a letter. It shouldn't be a big deal. I can show you the endorsements we've already packaged in. I can update you on what we're doing. The other thing that's missing is that Tim Fox hasn't solved the question of what's the legal entity we'd be funding. Okay, so but we don't still ask for the money without having all those answers. Okay, so I think that'd be a short agenda item for the 26th. I hope. And then wildfire management, you just heard Timothy talking. I've been in touch with Vibrant Planet and what they do. And I have concerns about wildfire management in our area in general. But I would hope to be able to present what a integrated regional wildfire management process would look like and contrast that with what the county is now doing. And that would then lead to hopefully some changes. So, I mean, that doesn't have to happen any particular week, but depending on when you have mountain or glycophosphate or other priorities, I could schedule somebody to talk to us about the wildfire management issue. Any other agenda items?
Hey, I'm sorry I said hey, but could
You mean esteemed chair?
Apologize for that. Is it possible that we could get an agenda item to vote on moving to the new location?
Well, when the location is available, yes, we could. Let me just ask right now, what's the sense of the council? I mean, they don't have the equipment. When they have the equipment, are people willing to go over there and try it out?
Yes.
Yes.
I am.
No.
Okay.
No. Any other no's?
And since we're talking about it,
Well, it's not a vote yet, but I just want to ask the sense of the council before we agendize.
Yeah, well, you continue to take movement in that direction. That room has no windows. You have no control over our ventilation that we'll be dealing with. It's either cold or hot. And it forces essentially everybody to drive to, as to where this location allows for the maximum amount of people that live close by to just walk to. Very centrally located, easy to get to, and it's comfortable. It's not cold. It's not, we can open the windows. We can look out the windows.
Okay, your opinion is noted. We're not voting on it yet. Gus, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, if our efficacy as a council is tied to our influence with our supervisor, I think it is politically insane for us not to take up his offer to relocate to his office.
There is that.
Explain that.
There is that.
Politically insane.
Yes. for us to spurn his offer.
I would scratch and say it was absurd, but.
I can be negotiated to absurd.
Okay.
That's fine. But
I mean, we're for the county and we're for the community and for us.
yeah. Yes, but our ability to get anything done is heavily dependent on our relationship to him. The closer we are to
So
him,
we're going to have
the
a
more
bad
we're gonna
relation.
get-
We're going to have a bad relationship if we choose
I
to.
think if we spit on his offer like that.
Is that spitting? I don't think it's.
Oh yeah.
Kimberly, you're quiet here, but you want to say something?
I do. So, I have a separate concern in that originally the reason we were looking for another location is because some of us were concerned about COVID. And I am still wearing a mask. And the only reason I'm coming in person to these meetings is because so far they've been, most people have attended online. And that feels like a level of safety to me that I might not have at the other location. I take Gus's point that yes, that is strategically important. But I would like some assurances that there are some safety, there's some safety involved in that. And I guess the other option we could think about is maybe we have some meetings here and maybe we have some meetings there. Maybe they're not always in the same place.
Okay.
And maybe that's a nice compromise.
And to your point, we should have ventilation equipment that sterilizes the air, purifies the air, and so forth.
Well, better ventilation would be good. I don't understand the ventilation in that space. So
all I know is I went to the open house and it was extremely hot. I thought I was going to pass out. Now I have no idea what the temperature is on a regular basis. I don't know. So I like a compromise. I'm fine to give things a try, but I think definitely a compromise of being here because just having the windows, having the ventilation for me is important. And I'm also claustrophobic. So I don't know if I should tell everybody that because somebody might grab me someday and stick me in a box. But, I really don't like not having windows. I can deal with it for short term, but
okay,
it's not comfortable.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
When I guess Gus and I were at the opening and Ray made a big point of, I got this office so the MCC can be here.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
He did?
Yep.
Because he never said that before.
He said it, but
I mean,
he said it to everybody.
He's saying it now.
that sounds like positioning to me.
So he's.
Okay, so just so you know, one of the advantages of this office is that we now have staff not only coming over from the county, but we have Assemblyman Berman's office, Senator Becker's office, and next week, Anna Eshoo, the congressional ladies, her staff coming over on a semi-regular basis to meet with us. So that's exposure that as a community, the Midcoast did not have until Ray got here. Now, that doesn't mean we have to hold all our meetings there, but that office has provided value, right? Because it's now viewed as a friendly place for the people from our other elected officials' offices to come by. So there's good that's coming out of that office.
Oh, yeah. And I'd be willing to go. I'm not saying I'm not. I just thought, just feel it out.
Okay, feel it out. All right, thank you. Claire?
Okay, I want to make a request at the end, so I just want to.
Of the agenda topics.
For a future agenda.
Okay, go ahead, Burnett.
All right.
You got to be at the mic.
Okay, yes. But I want to make it quick. We talked about some of these earlier, but I did send everybody that should have gotten a request to add 3 items, which was the repeated flooding from Quarry Park runoff, the increased neighborhood parking and traffic, which has gotten a lot worse with the pump track and the park being used more, as well as the off-leash dogs in the children and play area, which was brought up earlier. I'd like to make a request that those be made future agenda items so that they can be reviewed and action taken to get something done. It's great to hear that Parks is working on this, but involvement is needed until a solution is found and agreed on and completed for the runoff. As you've seen from the pictures, it's a big problem. And I know it's a subcategory of the Midcoast wide stormwater management plan, and we support that as the group that I'm with. but immediate action is required on this flooding. We're getting into summer, getting into winter, getting out of summer. It's probably not going to happen this year, but if we don't start pushing a little bit, what are they going to do about it? Just let it go again. So I'm just making a formal request if you could please add those 3 items.
Into the minutes, Secretary.
Okay, runoff, parking and dogs.
And repeated flooding from Quarry Park runoff.
Yeah.
Increased neighborhood parking and traffic. And off-leash dogs in the children and family play areas, basically enforcement of the restriction of those, the off-leash dogs, not dog on, these are off-leash dogs.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to note that thanks to an astounding job of time management, we are 2 minutes and change away from the forecasted completion in spite of all the chaotic interruption and discussion that has occurred. I'm interested if anybody is considering a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Can we talk for 2 more minutes?
No.
We started a minute early too.
Gus is moving.
Gus moves. Do we have a second for adjournment?
I'll second that.
All right. Do we want to wait 2 minutes to vote?
No.
Okay. Call a roll.
Greg?
Yes.
Gus? No, we have to vote on.
Because we're in person, we don't have to do
Any
it.
objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Us by application for adjournment.
Now, Gus, you have something on the calendar tomorrow. Given the tenant protection thing, there's no urgency or project that we have to do that. Just see what. I know. So you make it so productive use of time. Also, it's going to be the president. Yes, I see it.
It's great to meet you.
I think it's